Welcome to the Give for Grouse podcast, dedicated to giving the rough grouse a voice by promoting sound wildlife management, advocating for forest health, and championing all things conservation. Now let's get to the show with Cody Altizer and Eric Long. Welcome back to another episode of Give for Grouse podcast. As the intro stated, I'm Eric Long, brother from another mother, from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mr. Cody Altizer. Cody, how are you?
Good. Eric Long, how's your world?
My world, in the words of the great philosopher Cody Altizer, right as rain.
Right as rain.
Right as rain.
I heard that.
Speaking of rain,
on a couple TV shows.
Really?
One of which you and Kelly have got to watch it on my behalf. Watch it for me. You will love it.
What's
I
that?
promise you will love it. Breaking Bad.
Really?
Y'all will. There's a lot of shows I like that I would not recommend to you because I know they're not your jam. You guys would love it. I have seen it all the way through multiple times. It is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, the best TV show of all time.
Oh, come on now.
Truly. Like it is.
Yeah, Seinfeld.
Oh my God, Seinfeld. Well, and maybe Breaking Bad isn't a sitcom. So like in terms of drama or whatever that's
Netflix
categorized.
type of show.
Yeah. Like maybe many people would say the best TV show of all time.
Really?
It is that good. The writing, the dialogue, the acting. It is. I could pick it up right now and watch 2 or 3 episodes, and I know I could recite the lines almost, and I would be hooked. It's that good. I think so, and I think knowing y'all.
Right as rain is in that.
Heisenberg.
Is that how we got?
Walter White said one time, "Right as rain,"
Really?
and it's stuck.
Yeah, you say that quite a bit. I actually was joking around. I was thinking to myself, this was a while back, because I noticed that you were saying it quite a bit. I was going to put hey, we'll put that on your headstone, right as rain, Cody Altizer.
I say right as rain and good as gold. I try to think. I'm trying to think of something else. I thought of another thing. In our last episode, we talked about grouse goggles with Bill. We were talking about stewardship, and I was like, "What's an alliteration in the same breath as stewardship?" Yesterday, as I was bebopping along in the woods with my backpack sprayer, spraying stiltgrass, stewardship shades.
Steward shades.
Stewardship shades. Like you're looking at the woods through your grouse goggles. Look at your woods, your property, your habitat through stewardship shades.
We are going to have to it's going to have to be a store. Like you walk into JCPenney and it's all our shirts from all the slogans that come up. We're running out of room. We need a bigger store.
Mm-hmm. We got some good stuff.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of that, that's a good segue into the homework time. First thing, we do have some merch. We have some shirts and a hoodie. And shirts, they're gray, standard color. Hoodie, gray as well. And they got the grouse with the chainsaw on it, just ripping and tearing. And the T-shirts tend to run the same size. So if you wear an extra large, order an extra large. If the hoodies, now it's a different type of story. Might want to size up. And no one likes to see a 2X, so you got some work to do. All right? So, yeah. So the prices, I've already forgot the price of $25 for the shirt, right, Cody? And we have a sale. We'll even drop it down to $30 for the hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
Drop it down to $30 for the hoodie. So remember, gray, T-shirts $25, same size. Hoodies, might want to tend to order the size up due to the make of it and what have you. So pretty cool. Merch. Do you want to talk about the other one?
We made a post about it. Or
you might as well.
Our stories. There's another shirt. I ordered one for me, ordered one for you. This should be here in a few days. It is. I think it's
funny.
'Tis the season. Hopefully for everybody out there seeing baby birds scooting across the forest floor or the prairie or the old field. Turkey poults, quail chicks, grouse chicks. What do you call a baby pheasant? What are they? Chicks?
Chicks. Yeah,
Ditch chickens.
they
I
are
don't care.
today.
Send
How
them
about
back
that?
across the pond for all I care.
Oh my God.
Truly, I don't
It's
get the whole pheasant
blasphemy.
thing.
This is over.
No, pheasant? No. I'm a proud American. We got cool enough birds God put on
Oh
the
my
mighty
God.
US
You
of
know how
A.
much that Chinese thing revenue produces for conservation? You're looking at it all wrong. Altizer, looking
I
at it all
wonder
wrong.
if you were a prairie chicken, how many, if you would view it differently.
No, I wouldn't, because we're one. We're synced together as one out there on a Great Plains.
Candidly, I'm kind of mostly just picking, but truthfully, I don't get the appeal. All the other dusky grouse, you ever seen those?
I think I have. I
You
like to
you
say I
have.
have.
I don't know if you could pick it
Yeah.
out. All the American birds, or not even American, North American. I think they're just cooler. The pheasant does nothing for me. Anyway, baby bird season. So we have a T-shirt that has our logo on the front, Gift for Grouse Initiative, and on the back, it's kind of a cartoon. Kind of what is a cartoon? Kind of a
Yeah, it's a stick drawing type
cartoonish,
thing.
yeah, light-hearted design. A little baby chicks, and it says on the top it says brooding habitat, and it has the illustration, the little chicks, not species specific, standing in some brooding habitat with some bugs and some bare soil and some umbrella plants. So on top it says brooding habitat, then it gives you the illustration, and then underneath it says chicks dig it, which I think is just cool.
Look at you.
I don't know.
Look
I
at
get,
you. He's
I'm
getting
not hard to
people.
make
He's
laugh.
getting people.
It's
No,
cool though. Brooding habitat.
it is
Chicks
cool. I'm not
dig
gonna
it.
say it's not.
So anyway, that's a
Oh,
new T-shirt.
yeah.
It does cost a little bit more because it's a front and a back design. So those are $30 as well. But same as a chainsaw grouse, true to size. It's the same shirt,
Yeah,
different
it's
color,
just different.
light blue.
It's a different
So,
color, though. Yeah. All right.
but yeah, brooding
Well, good
habitat.
deal.
Chicks dig it. T-shirt. Order it. Wear it proudly.
If you want to know what it looks like, go on our social. I think it was on Instagram that he posted, and you will be able to see what you are buying. But other homework thing, as per usual, if you leave a 5-star review of the podcast, Cody, more than likely will send you some stickers of your
I will.
choice.
Be
All you
happy.
gotta do is just take a screenshot of it, send the address, and he will get that in the mail to you directly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and people have been doing that, and we appreciate everybody doing that. The stickers have been going out lately, so it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's some people that have been helping us and supporting us. I've been shipping them some sticks with some positive feedback, and people are digging what we're doing. I know that for a fact, which is exciting to hear people that you have no. I had a gentleman, his name is Carter, and I think we should get him on a podcast one of these times. He's from Mississippi, Cody, and he has a big wildlife management construction business. I'm like, this dude is legit. He knows timber and he knows logging and all this stuff. And he messaged some positive things, and yeah, and yeah, he came out of left field. I'm like, damn, dude, that's awesome.
Cool.
And I actually got a card. I have to get that in the mail. I did it and forgot to send it. But anyway, regardless, do that and you will win
Dun, 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 dun.
sticks of your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But other designs will be coming soon. One step at a time, people. Calm down, relax. They will be coming.
Yeah.
Today's
Chainsaw and grouse. Chainsaw, grouse, and drip torch is
yeah.
on the to-do list.
Oh, for sure. It's funny that people love these things so much, and it's stickers. It's awesome to see grown adults get all excited. The one guy, dude, stickers, thanks. It's like it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It is so cool. People sending ideas. I had a good friend from college, Mr. Casey Hare. He sent me. I sent it to you. It was like another cool idea, to do a sticker. But people are thinking of us, and that's what I appreciate. It's pretty cool. But today's guest, I'll let Cody do the honors, but he's been all over on podcast, and I know Cody mentioned his name, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to say.
His name's
sure.
Thomas Mlsna. He is from Southwest Wisconsin, I believe. He's one of those people that I don't know, never talked to him,
Right?
but have followed him, listened to him on a couple of podcasts that we have been on, the Hunter podcast, the Everland Outdoors podcast. And I think we've talked about it. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. It takes somebody who I know or I'm interested in to want to do that. And I've followed Thomas, I think for a year or two on social media, and just gravitated towards his approach to land management and how he communicates it. There's something about him. I think there's a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities between us and him. And there's some people you've never met, and you're just like, I have a feeling I'd get along with this guy. He's one of those people. So really like his approach to land management. He calls it, I don't know if he calls it or coins it, but he refers to it as holistic land management, which I think is pretty cool and I appreciate. And it sounds like, and we'll have him describe it a little bit more, but holistic management, when I hear it, I'm thinking not species specific. I'm thinking like managing for an entire ecosystem. That's what I think of when I hear that approach. And all that to say, excited to hear what he says. He speaks well. He speaks with a lot of analogies, which I appreciate, and it helps people understand. Yeah. When he's communicating, and he's an educator, he's a consultant. So using analogies to get people to follow and understand what he's saying is a trait of a good communicator, I think. So I don't know. I'm excited. Like I said, don't know him from Adam really, but feel like I do enough to have a good conversation.
Yeah. Well, if not, it's gonna be awkward. We'll just
sit there and look at each other.
We'll just apologize at the end of this. Go ahead. Well, that was a strike. Anyway, how about them Indians?
I got a strike for you, which I will save for the end of the episode. We'll get to the good stuff.
What? No date. All right, we're going to start throwing stones. Huh?
Without further ado, okay. Thomas Mlsna.
Okay.
Good morning, Thomas Mlsna. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm well. How are you guys?
Right as rain, I tell you. We are, this is take 2, speaking of the rain. We tried last week. I got stormed out here in Virginia. We had a nice band of storms come out, knocked out power. So we are a week behind on this conversation with you, Thomas. I appreciate you being flexible and working it out with us. But again, it's funny. I don't know. I mean, you're on some podcasts and chat with people quite a bit in your day to day. Is it just Eric and I seem to always talk about the weather? It's not on purpose. Do you experience that as well?
Oh yeah.
Never do we do it on purpose, but it always seems.
I think it's a man
to go
thing.
Down that road. I don't know if if we're coming of age to be old men talking about the weather or what the case is.
It's funny you say that. My power was out here yesterday afternoon. Actually, I had to cancel a bunch of meetings. We had a little storm roll through and power was out. But yeah, I saw, I guess there's always people out there trying to sell you something, right? So if you're a business owner, you get spammed with these ads like how to talk professionally and how to start conversations. And then like, they're always like, don't talk about the weather. You lose credibility. I'm like, my whole life revolves around the weather.
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah. Every phone call, almost every phone call I make starts with that. I'm talking to a client, a remote client out in New York. I'm like, I don't know what the weather's like out there. So how's the weather been? What's, because I genuinely want to know, like, have you had a rainy spring? Have you had a cold spring? You're like, what's the growing season like? If I don't ask you about the weather, then I don't know what the conditions are. So I always start talking about the weather. So it works out. And yeah, maybe we are just old men sitting around talking about the weather. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, me too.
My knee flared up the other day too. Let's talk about that.
Oh, so there's something big rolling in is what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh my knee. Yeah. Elbow. Tommy John on my knee.
Yeah. I got all sorts of those injuries, old football injuries. I sleep funny. And there's a storm coming in and then my neck's stiff for a couple days.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, cool, man. Yeah, appreciate you again for coming on. I know a little bit about you, Thomas. I have followed your content for a while. You were on the Hunter podcast, which Eric and I are friends with, Jeremy and Jared. And we're on and have been on their podcast a couple times. The Everland Outdoors podcast. I heard and watched you on that one as well. So over the years, you've been on my radar, and for our podcast, I told Eric and I chatted after we talked last week. And again, we really don't know you from Adam, nor do you us. And we were just talking because, we hadn't talked to you before that, didn't have any prior relationship with him. He's like, oh yeah, he's a good dude, this, that, and the other. I was like, yeah, candidly, like I wouldn't have you on if I didn't like you. So, yeah. Your messaging and your approach to management and all that stuff is really how I know you best. And we'll certainly get into that. But before we do, I think you do some consulting. Give us the quick and dirty, the rundown on who you are, what you do, where you came from, so we can lay the groundwork for who you are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to be on here and have a conversation with you guys. My name is Thomas Mlsna. We had to work that out in the beginning, right? Sound out the last name, Mlsna, Mlsna.
I think it's an I still, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah, I don't, it's like the dog that I have is a Deutsch Drathar, and if that's even how you pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone I talk to pronounces it slightly different, and people see him, they're like, "Oh, it's a German wire hair." I was like, "Yep, it is good enough."
Yeah.
Like I'm not like a major dog enthusiast or connoisseur. I love the dog. He's a great dog, but I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So it's kind of the same with the name. You didn't mispronounce the name. Yep, we're good. But no, Thomas Mlsna, my business, consulting and land management is what I do. The Untamed Ambition is the name of the business. And my background and where all this really started for me, I grew up on a farm, a large family farm, still active there. I don't do a whole lot of the farming, more so the wildlife management side of things. My dad was a veterinarian, still is a practicing veterinarian, but now just focuses solely on our herd, which is, I don't even know what they're at, 1,000 head dairy herd, somewhere around that. I think they milk around 900 head. And then there's young stock and stuff like that. So it's a big operation. Most of my family is involved, my immediate family. I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and we're all involved at some level. But that's my background. I like to bring that up because it is still very much conventional agriculture, but we are tucked into the rolling hills of southwestern Wisconsin. So we're limited by topography as far as like expansion goes, or else it probably would be a massive CAFO, like a massive industrial farm, because that's kind of my dad's, like, that baby boomer mentality is like, just grow, just grow, just grow. But there's limitations there. So I come from that background. My mother was a teacher, she focused primarily on special needs children, and she was like a master gardener. So green thumb, like loved to grow things. And that was like the upbringing I had. She was a very nurturing parent. My father was like kind of the other end of the spectrum, more like utilitarian. So then you take me, and I grew up in the woods. I always tell everyone I was born in the barn, but grew up in the woods and loved the outdoors, loved hunting. We've got a big extended family. We show up to our farm every year for the firearm season here in Wisconsin. And many of them, come to bow hunt and turkey hunt and whatnot. But there's 17 other hunters that hunt our farm. And of the farm, it's, again, we're kind of buying up land as we can so that we can stop it from being developed. But I think they're up to around like 1,500, 1,800 acres or so. And most of it is tillable, but there's about 400-ish acres of pasture / timber hunting land. So I spent a lot of time in the woods. And over time, you kind of see, I'm sure you guys see it out east as well, right? Like the development, and there's 2 small fields here and a brushy tree row, and then this guy buys that guy out and bulldozes out the whole tree row and makes one big field. And that just kept on progressing more and more and more. And again, my passion was always in the outdoors. So I went to college originally for wildlife biology and natural resource management. And then in the long, strange turn of events, I actually ended up transferring and getting a degree in electromechanical technology. And then I worked in the outdoor industry for over 10 years, developing, prototyping, testing, and supporting trail cameras. So I worked for Reconyx trail cameras for over 10 years. But in that time, I still always had this passion for the outdoors. And, originally I wanted to be a wildlife biologist. And, and things change and you kind of start looking towards the future. Like, well, there's really no money in that. Now I wish I would have just stuck with it.
Trust me, there's not.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, I think there's more opportunity now, right? But it's not as straightforward, right? And honestly, it probably wouldn't have changed much for me, right? As far as like staying in that path or taking the path I've taken now. But, in a roundabout way, I went from wanting to be a biologist to working with a lot of biologists through technology and like the research side of things. And that's what I really enjoyed the most, my time working the trail camera company. Not, I loved working with hunters, the customer service. I ran the whole customer service department. Essentially built the whole customer service department of that company, which was, the customer service was almost non-existent when I started working there. So I really enjoyed that. But I was always fascinated by the research side of things, getting to learn how they're using cameras to do long-term studies, how they're using cameras to find animals that haven't been observed in jungles, for decades, right? Or no photographic evidence of these animals ever, or using trail cameras on a time-lapse setting to do glacial movement studies or erosion studies and things like that. So I was always fascinated by that side of things, and I was able to take that and kind of apply it to my own situation, hunting this big farm. And I always had these theories in my mind of like, okay, big deer do this because of this, and that's why I kind of coach my clients on is like employing this, pseudo version of a scientific method to your hunting, where it's like you're trying to come up with theories based on the information that you have, and then trying to prove or disprove those theories. And that's how I've always kind of operated on the hunting side is, well, I think that this deer is doing this because of this. So then I'm looking for those conditions again, and then I'm either putting a trail camera out or I'm going out and hunting or glassing, some sort of observation to prove or disprove that theory. And a lot of times it's just like, oh, taking my bow in the woods and I think that buck's going to be there. You either prove it or you don't, right?
Yeah.
But point being is I had the resources, right? I was prototyping cameras, I was testing cameras. So instead of, I'm going to move this camera from here to there, I'm like, well, I'm just going to load this puppy up with company paid for batteries and I'm going to put another one out there. And at one point in time, I think I had, I don't know, 160, 170 cameras out across the farm that I would cycle through. So instead of swapping batteries, I'd take this camera out, test it for a month or two, and then just pull the whole camera, go through the data. Now I'm at a point in my life where I have so little free time that I can't even fathom the thought of sitting down and scrolling through that many trail camera photos and videos. And now I'm like an efficiency guy where it's like, I just need that one picture of that deer within a 1 or 2 week period. And I know he's in the area and I know how to hunt him. Yeah, because I've kind of figured that out over time too. Right. But that was my background. Right. So I worked for that camera company for over 10 years and I just wasn't fulfilled in that side of things. I was helping all these people, and I think actually, a big part of it is I talk to a lot of people, tens of thousands of customers a year, talking about their hunting situation, giving them advice on camera setups, and obviously like helping them if they have actual camera technical issues. But then I hear all these stories, and I worked with some of the biggest names in the outdoor industry, the Drurys, Greg Ritz, and you name them, anyone that's been sponsored by anyone, came through Reconyx at some point in time. Even the guys sponsored by other trail camera brands are using Reconyx cameras because they were more reliable, more durable. So they're using those in the background because they rely on them from a professional aspect, but then they're using, whatever camera to get the X number of photos for content, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I worked with all those guys. I had a lot of long conversations with those guys, and you learn a lot, right? You absorb a lot from them. But ultimately it's like, you get in this soup of different perspectives. And, again, all the way back to like the conventional ag model to like the Whitetail industrial complex, right? Where it's like, oh man, like maybe we're going too far in that direction because now we've kind of overlooked the resource itself and we're just focusing on how we make money. And I wasn't okay with that. And then, this whole world of whitetail consulting kind of blossomed. And I worked with a lot of those guys. I talked to a lot of those guys, but more so I talked to a lot of their clientele and a lot of their customers. And I've reviewed a lot of plans and looked at them from, again, just my perspective, my education, and my experience. And there's just a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions all the time. So eventually I shifted gears and I started my business in 2018. I went full time in 2020 around the whole COVID fiasco because that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Yeah.
The powers that be at work were clamping down on things that I didn't necessarily agree with, because again, I'm that kid in the back of the classroom that raises his hand and calls the teacher out, right? Not to be a jerk, but just like this doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me, and I'm not just going to blindly follow it. So, when that stuff hit with COVID, I didn't. It was just kind of enough. Enough was enough, and I saw an out and took it. And since then, I've been even asking even more questions, right? And that's
Mm.
kind of the nice thing is, for me, I look at it like deer hunting's my passion, but you've probably even heard me say this before. Like I tell clients all the time, like high quality deer habitat's for the birds. Like if you
Yeah.
just focus purely on songbirds and ground nesting birds, you're going to have way better deer habitat than any advice you get from these guys that are just pushing you towards deer habitat because they don't see all the layers and the levels and the whole system as a whole.
Mm.
But ultimately, the deer, my track record in killing deer is what got me in the door and kind of prove like gives me the credibility to sit down with someone that's willing to invest thousands of dollars into their property because they want that.
Right.
But by the end of the day, every conversation we have is about birds and butterflies, right? Which is, to
Yeah.
me is cool, right? It reminds me of my mom because she was always like a gardener and loved birds and butterflies, and like I'm not too masculine to say that, right? Like I
Oh,
do
yeah.
enjoy like the little things, right? I think
Yeah.
that like all of us we should be fighting for the underdog in that situation, right? But I have these conversations with these high-end clients, and I say high-end, but they're successful businessmen, right?
Mm.
And they've worked hard in their lane to get to where they are, and they also understand the value of consulting, bringing someone in that can help them build out a long-term plan based on experience. And I would always get asked that question from these type of people is, what's the best way to do this? What's our best approach at this? And that was the burning question in my mind all the time because I've seen the conventional model play out over and over again. And I've seen the industrial complex play out over and over again. So when I get asked that question, my first reaction is, well, this is kind of the conventional thought process on this, or this is how most people do that, but it's not the best way, right?
Mm.
And sometimes I don't even know what the best way is, but what I can tell you is this type of system that is reductive in a sense, right? Like food plots are a good example of that, right? It's a small scale conventional farming model where we're just kind of pushing in inputs and hoping to pull a yield out, but we're not really thinking about the system as a whole and how
Mm.
that plays into deer attraction and deer nutrition, which all stems from the soil health, right? We're banking minerals, we're banking nutrients, we're moving those through the plants, we're moving those through the animals. And my big push on that is, those deer are moving those nutrients from that plot throughout the rest of your property too. It's all part of this bigger cycle and bigger system. But that was one really good example where you kind of explain that. Like this method, this process actually makes this system less efficient over time. So we know that's not sustainable. So I can't tell you that's the best way to do it. It might be a short-term thing, but our long-term plan has to aim towards, more of a regenerative or productive system where we're putting less in than we're getting back, but we're making it better all the time. And we're thinking about 3, 5, 15 years down the road and not just like, what do I do to kill a big buck right now?
Right. Yeah.
So, this week I had two calls. I do like my consulting process. We have a sit down call, talk about goals and perspective and stuff like that. I had two new clients coming up here in the next couple weeks and had those calls this week. And one of the main things I emphasize is long-term management and
Mm.
just the concept of time plus consistency and management is what equals your success. And what I always say to these guys, and again, most of them understand it because they're successful in their own right. And
Right.
I say, why are you successful in business? Because you've put a lot of thought and a lot of time into that thing. So you shouldn't expect to buy this property and in a year have full-blown success because it takes time. It takes time for things to develop. It takes inputs as far as like if you're going to make changes, right, you got to invest time, or you're investing money and it's someone else's time, my time, the next guy's time, right? But it takes time. So
Mm.
we shouldn't look for these band-aid fixes where we just snap our fingers and things change overnight. And if someone's selling you that, you should be wary, right?
Right.
Because we
Yeah.
all know it's like that fad diet, like, oh, just eat this and you'll lose 40 pounds overnight. Like, well, that's probably not sustainable.
Yeah.
So there's so many similarities there, with with health, with land use, with hunting, all these things come together, and that's ultimately why I went down this path with holistic land management is,
Hmm.
how do we look at this system as a whole and go, okay, we want better deer hunting, but also you should understand that these other animals that are part of the system are what make our deer hunting good, right?
Hmm.
Or make it sustainable, I should say, because if we just go to this conventional model, which we know that deer are a generalist species. Well, we know, right, that deer are very much a generalist species, that they can live in a suburban environment where they're feeding on bird feeders and eating invasive shrubs
Right.
and, bedding in a buckthorn thicket all day. They don't necessarily need the diverse native habitat that a lot of other species do, but they thrive from it.
Yeah.
And if you want, and the biggest issue we have here in the Midwest is the sheer number of deer. And
Yeah.
for, even for the last 5, 6 years, I've been trying to preach that hard to guys. Like, I understand. I understand like this deer hunter mindset. And, ultimately a lot of these guys that don't live on their property. So maybe they do spend the bulk of their time, in their suburban backyard in the city, and then they go out to this remote property and they want to see deer. But it's not healthy to see 40 deer in this field every night, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's my approach now. My approach hasn't changed, but I guess how I explain things has changed a lot. And you guys understand that. Like, you kind of understand like how to articulate a fact
Hmm.
without like throwing it in someone's face, but also like kind of twist it around the science or the data and the research. And where I'm at now, I just really, really emphasize these guys the need for balanced
Yeah.
habitat, because what pushes these high deer numbers is imbalance in the habitat where we don't really have native habitat, and you've heard me say this before too, right? Like food plus cover equals habitat. Food plus cover equals habitat. So
Hmm.
that massive monoculture of invasives or massive monoculture of switchgrass and then a food plot, you got cover over here and now you have food over here. So you do have food and cover, but they're not together. So you
Yeah.
separate those two, and that reduces the quality of your property. And that's what I refer to as habitat, right? Where it's like you're literally
Habitat. Nice.
reducing the
Yeah.
capacity of your property by 50% because you
Yeah.
separated food and cover. It's
Hmm.
habitat. It's half the habitat. And that's kind of the MO that a lot of these whitetail guys push, because it makes sense. It's perfect for hunting strategy as
Yeah.
far as like, well, if we separate food and cover, deer have to move to eat. I don't have to worry about them holding up in this bedding area, browsing all day. Heaven forbid we want deer to eat a natural diet. So we don't want them browsing all day, right?
Yeah.
So separate that. But then I come in and try to quantify it and explain it to them. Be like, well, your food plot that's producing, 400, 500 pounds or 500 pounds of forage per acre, right? That that's great. So let's do that, but let's shrink it down and maybe we even fence it off and just preserve it for the hunting season. And then take all the rest of the space that you were wasting feeding deer soybean sprouts in the summertime, and let's fill that in with native prairie. And your timber, let's thin that out. Let's get some sunlight to the ground, because now we can get like 1,200 pounds per acre of
Mm.
forage. And with that comes this really awesome component of cover. So now we have food and we have cover, and that's really good habitat. And when we do that, we don't pull in these massive doe groups, these doe numbers, right? Instead, we have our resident doe herds, and we've got our mature bucks that come and go, and they're back in the cover because they've got enough cover to feel secure, and they're feeding on our plots. Like, this is what we want. So, it's little things with, like, again, my approach and my vernacular. Like, I used to say, we want to create a really attractive hunting property. I don't say that anymore because I don't want an attractive property. I
Yeah.
want a property that holds a core group of deer and pulls a few from neighbors, like the, kind of an 80-20 rule, right? 80% of our deer are more resident, 20% come and go, but inversely on that neighboring property, those 20% of the deer spend 80% of the time there. But ultimately, we want to keep this core group of deer because one, it helps us manage, like we understand what we're dealing with. But two, it helps us stabilize that system
Mm.
where, like a lot of these guys will push like, oh, you got to have massive cornfields for late season food. And what I'm trying to get clients to understand more and more is like, what happens when you pull in all the deer from a mile away in the middle of the winter and they feed on corn? That's a high burning, high carbohydrate, right? They don't feel satiated from that. So they
Yeah.
go and they eat that. And, it's just like you go home and eat a sugary snack. Well, what do you want 5 minutes later? You want more sugary
Sugar
snacks, right?
snacks, right?
So what happens to those deer? They eat and they eat, and then they go in the woods and they just browse everything down. And now you have 10x the carrying capacity in your woods, and they just demolish your woods. And then next year, what comes back? All the bad stuff.
Hmm.
So trying to get people to understand this bigger cycle. And it's funny because it's what conservationists were preaching 20 years ago. Deer hunting is a management tool, right?
Yeah.
Deer hunting is a management tool, and we've kind of lost sight of that. We do, and there's a lot of different angles and perspectives on it. But like where I'm at in Wisconsin, I'm our farm is right on the northern end of the CWD hot zone.
Mm, okay.
So you guys are probably familiar with how CWD was handled in Wisconsin, where it was like kill them all, kill everything, right? Which I'm not a big fan of that approach, mainly because of the public perspective on it. But ultimately, it wasn't wrong, right? We
Yeah.
just needed better long-term management as we need to reduce deer numbers, period. And but the pendulum swung so far back now that a lot of guys don't want to kill anything. And to be fair, like my dad's generation, when they grew up, there wasn't nearly as many deer. And so my dad's he's going on 80 and he's never harvested an antlerless deer in his entire life.
Nice.
So
That's
like
crazy.
the management perspective that they had for the longest time was anything with antlers is a target, never shoot a doe.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big fan of Ernebuck to say the least. But
Right.
but yeah, so that's kind of my background in the long and short of it is, that's how I got to this point is just again a lot of perspective and seeing things over time, but then employing these different methods and seeing them really start to blossom. And
Hmm.
ultimately, my goal with every property is to create an efficient system. So what I tell people with my, specific hunting consulting side of things, because I do a little on like farming side, like integrating egg systems into properties, like trying to produce some level of income, which generally doesn't involve like pure row cropping. And then I do some like native yard, like landscaping and backyard food system stuff, which to me, it's all the same thing. So if I'm going to a
It
hunting
is.
property and we're managing native stuff and we're trying to put in fruit trees in certain areas, and then we just either downscale it or upscale is what it
Mm.
basically comes down to. But what I always tell my clients, the three main goals of my hunting specific program are holdability, huntability, and management efficiency. So, and I would argue that management efficiency is really the number one priority. So it's like you're doing this thing, but what are you going to do next?
Mm.
In your world, you guys understand that. It's like, okay, we're gonna harvest this timber, and then what? Are we
Yeah.
done for forever, or are we on a rotation where we do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, or like where I'm at, it's like we cut this, and then what do we want to regenerate, and what do we want to how do we want to regulate that moving forward? So how frequent do we want that disturbance to come back in? Are we going to burn
Mm.
every 3 to 5 years? Are we going to burn every 8 years? Or are we just going to let it go? And, depending on the location, are we going to mulch it down at some point in time or mow it off or log it again in 25 years? So, that's I'm trying to get guys to think long term more so. Like, okay, we can do these things. There's these low hanging fruits that are pretty easy to tackle. But if you really want to move the needle and ensure, ultimately, what it comes down to, right, is ensure that this resource is around for
Mm.
your kids and their kids and their kids, then we got to do things different. We can't
Yeah.
keep doing them the way that we are. So
Yeah.
that's me in a nutshell.
That's the essence of stewardship, man. I mean, that's, like I said, I don't know how long I followed you, a year or two anyway. The holistic approach, is how you label it. But, I see it, and you mentioned the word system several times in that. And your consulting and approach to all this is, I don't know if ecosystem management is the right terminology, but you're managing for you're managing for ecosystems,
Yeah,
right? You're
100%.
managing for an entire ecosystem, which I don't know if you've ever reviewed any plans from Drumming Log Wildlife Management. If you did, you probably had to do a lot of
No, I
correction.
have not.
That's it. I don't know if Eric's still awake with us over there, but that's his consulting business. But yeah, it's something we preach a lot too. Is trying to get people to focus on the ecosystem within whatever size property you have. It could be 5 acres, it could be 500, and when you manage for an ecosystem, and the word system as part of ecosystem, I think is a really important word or thing to key in on, because as you talked about, everything's integrated. It's just this energy cycling from species to species, flora to fauna, everything. Not to sound, it may sound cheesy to a lot of people, but to us, like, we understand it. Literally everything is connected.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at little details and see how native plant species support, native vegetation supports more insects, and more insects support more songbirds and more turkey poults, and then healthier turkey populations. And then as a result of that ladder of the system, then you have better turkey hunting. And then, the same thing with deer, to a lesser extent grouse, but I don't know how receptive people are. And another thing I've noticed about you and that I appreciate is your vocabulary. Strong. I am a sucker for good vocabulary, strong communication skills. So I imagine in how you explain everything, people do respond well to it, but the majority of your clients, and, speak candidly, to some, is it kind of in one ear, out the other? When you break it down in terms of, just how you laid it all out to us in terms of that managing for an ecosystem, how you communicate it to people, do you see the light switch kind of go off and they're like, oh yeah, I get it? Or does, most deer hunters, they just not even care?
No, I mean, at least where I am now, in the beginning, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was different. I think then I was probably chasing more clients than now. People come to me, and it's nice, obviously, from a business standpoint, but ultimately they come to me because they have kind of a similar vision, or they have, for example, I just talked to a gentleman the other day. I actually had just left a client property and was heading home. This guy had emailed me. I just checked my email quick and said, hey, I've got 45 minutes on the road. Let's just chat. He is a big fan of a different consultant. I'm not going to name names, but one of the top industrial consultants. Let's just say that, right?
Right.
But he said, I think he heard me on a podcast or something, but ultimately he came to me because he's like, I'm just so tired of the chemicals all the time. And to be fair, chemical use, you posted a video the other day that I thought was fantastic, to look at it as medicine as much as anything. And I literally say that to guys all the time. It's like, the difference between medicine and poison is the dose and the application, right?
Yeah.
So, like, herbicide, I think, is a very essential tool in forest management and habitat management. But in systems like food plots, where we're repeating the same process over and over again, I think it creates reduction in that system. So I think we can work our way out of that because we have more control over that type of system versus a more wild system and one that's overrun, right? So I want to create that clear delineation between those two perspectives, right? Because I'm not anti-chemical. I'm just anti-dependency on the chemical, right? So when it comes to food plots, we strive really hard to get people off of constant chemicals, and not that we don't use them from time to time, again, very targeted special applications, but it's not just like, well, I don't have to pre-plan. I'll just hit the easy button and go spray the piss out. Oh, it rained 10 minutes after I sprayed. I'm going to have to spray it again tomorrow. Because that's the reality of the situation. But, basically what it came down to is he's like, I just want to get away from corn and beans and constant chemical use. I was like, well, we can do that, because those corn and beans, like, that is, like, you're trying to force a monocrop, and that is what is creating the demand for these chemicals all the time. You're leaving all this exposed ground, or you're just pumping in all these synthetics, and it's destroying that system, and nature's trying to fix it. So when those weeds show up, it's just the ground trying to heal itself, trying to cover itself, trying to balance out the minerals, stuff like that. Point being, he came to me because of that specific thing. A lot of guys come to me just because they want to kill a deer, and then I explain to them, and again, to be fair with these other consultants, because I'm relatively new to the game, right? I mean, I guess I've been doing it for almost 10 years, 8 years, but a lot of these guys have been doing it for a long time. And, and I'm sure you guys see it too. It's like if you ever are on properties where other people have consulted and they did it 15 years ago, there was different problems 15 years ago. And especially where I'm at, the invasives were not that bad 10, 12, 15 years ago in most areas. And then now, in the last 5, 6 years, they've really started to explode. And that kind of ebbs and flows with, the timber cycle. The last time everything was logged heavy around this area, there wasn't really invasives. And now we're coming back through that cycle the last 8, 10 years, and there's invasives around. And what happens when you don't get ahead of them? They just take everything over. And just, disturbance in general. Everything around here was pastured really heavy, set stock grazing, so animals are just left to their own devices all the time. And then you open up the canopy from logging. There's no follow up with fire. There's no pre-inspection, stuff like that. But most of these guys, how I explain it to them is I just say, look at what's happening. It's not that hard. I mean, maybe it is for some guys, right? To get out of your tunnel and take a step back and just look at the current landscape, right? Both figuratively and literally, like both, what's going on in the industry. I mean, EHD outbreaks were at an all-time high throughout the country last year. CWD's running rampant, and that's a problem in and of itself because you've got a large percentage of people that don't believe in CWD. It's all scam. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I've seen sick deer on our property, and that's enough for me to know that it's real, right? And also, like from a biological perspective, it's like you look at it and you're like, yeah, like all these problems that are happening are kind of obvious because we're setting ourselves up for this kind of failure, right? It's like
Yeah.
I talked about this. I was on the Prairie Farm podcast. Good friends, the Hoxie Native Seed guys. Good friends with those guys. Great people. And we talk about this frequently. As like, at some point in time, we have to make the decision if we want to manage wildlife or if we're just content with farming deer. And that's what a lot of guys want. That they want the fish in the barrel experience. But they need to understand that you can't have that and all that beautiful landscape at the same time because deer are part of that system and deer very much are managers of that system. And at the same time, the rest of that system helps manage the health of the deer. So when I explain that to them, there's always like that one thing with every client that you're on the property, you're walking it, they're absorbing, and at the same time, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose, right? Because it's like all they've ever known is deer eat corn and beans and they bed in here and there. And then you're in there explaining to them, 75 different plant species while you're walking their property.
Right.
And, and again, it's like all from experience, like pokeweed is a good example, right? 8 years ago, I walked client property. I'll never forget it. We're walking this client property and come across this field and there's a bunch of pokeweed along this fence line. And the client's like, oh, that stuff is really poisonous. I got to get that out of here, right? And at the time, I didn't know enough. Like I knew what it was. I knew that deer ate it, but I didn't know enough to like have the conversation. Now I know that pokeweed's not really that poisonous. It can be. There's and you guys know too. It's like there's certain levels of toxins in every single plant.
Right.
So it's like how much do you eat? When do and to humans, like pokeweed, for example, like the berries, there's a lot of things in there that are actually good at blood purification. And the old timers, and that's what I learned this from. I was talking to some other guy, and he's like, "Oh, we used to freeze those berries and eat them. It's good for your arthritis." And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, okay." And the plant itself too. It's like 30% crude protein at certain stages, and deer love it. But that's just one example. So at that point in time, I didn't have the ammo to fire back. So I just kind of like soaked it in. But then I'm like, I don't know if I'd believe that because nothing that's native is that bad, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's the quantity. Yeah, I'm not going to go roll around in a pasture full of cow parsnip, right? In full sun, but that's also part of a system, right?
Right.
So there's always that one thing that you explain to guys. And, as of late, the big thing I try to get you guys to understand is the total balance of an ecosystem. And EHG is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be people out there selling you some sort of solution, right? And not to say that these pharmaceutical or band-aid type solutions aren't applicable short term, but they're not long-term fixes.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer, using EHD as an example, we look at what causes EHD or how it's spread, right? The biting midge and the life cycle with that, where they, lay the egg and the nymph stage is in the mud. And that's why these guys are trying to address the water, which I'm not against that by any means. But we take a zoom or take a step back and look at that bigger picture, that bigger cycle. What else is missing on this landscape where you have
Mm-hmm.
all these disease issues? Well, if I look around here when I'm standing in southern Ohio and all I see are closed canopy forests with nothing growing in the herbaceous layer, maybe there's a bunch of invasives in the shrub layer, and everything else is row crop. And these water sources that guys have out are essentially sediment ponds that are catching all of the chemical slew that comes off of the landscape. And then you want deer to drink out of that, and you want them to be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like dumping some chemical in there to demuck it's not going to make them healthier per se. What we need is a filtration system at many levels, and we need a defense system around these ponds to keep the midges away. So how do we do that? Well, we bring in native plants. We encourage and promote native plants because we've got a deep root system so we can slow the water down and that sediment doesn't get in that pond. The water that shows up in that pond is a lot cleaner, period. And on top of that, when we produce all these flowering forbs on the landscape, we produce more insects on the landscape, and then we feed and we hold insectivores. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we want to have a population of animals, dragonflies, bats, and birds around that are going to eat that midge when it hatches, then we need to feed them the rest of the year. We can't just expect them to
Yeah,
show up for the party, right?
but that doesn't make any money.
Correct. That doesn't
So
because
it doesn't make any money. Planting flowers and filtration system, that doesn't make any money for anybody. That's the problem with wildlife management. Let me get on my soapbox.
no,
It's
100%
just
preach.
it's absolutely we call ourselves conservationists and we're not. We're anymore. We should be turning into we're you, me, Cody, and a bunch of other people. Restorationists. I mean, that's in the business that we should be in anymore. It's
Yeah.
not conservation. What are we conserving?
No, you're spot
Like
on, and
what are we doing?
that's the problem, right?
Yeah. And it's just wildlife management. When QDM came on the landscape, I believe Al Brothers brought it into the landscape in the 80s in Texas. And then, Joe Hamilton grabbed it in the 90s, I believe. And I'm sure the dates are wrong. But, if everybody actually practiced, since we're talking about deer, I mean, everybody practiced quality deer management, the true aspect of it. I know, like in the Midwest, especially Ohio, when QDM, true QDM was rocking and rolling, no one talked about baiting, didn't talk about this. It was all about habitat management and controlling your doe herd, and things were great.
Hmm.
It just got stolen. I don't know what this is anymore, what we're doing. Yeah, that's why I kind of got out of all of it. It's just I'm burnt out, trying to, educate people. No one wants to hear me talk. I sound like Charlie Brown's teacher when I'm talking about an old field.
No,
It's just enough. Whatever. But
and
we're
I
in the
share that.
restoration business. That's what
I
we're
share
doing
that
right now.
sentiment, and you're spot
Yeah.
on. And it is the money. It really is. I mean, and
Oh yeah. Like I'll debate that with anybody. Come on. I
well,
mean,
and that's the
tell me
problem with
what you're doing.
industry.
Huh?
Industry in general, right?
Yeah.
Anytime something becomes an industry and the focus is on the profit and not the resource, right? Because
Yeah.
what does an industry do? It exploits a resource,
Yes.
right? And that's what happens. And again, I'm in the same boat. I'm kind of in this, and not necessarily if you can't beat them, join them mindset, but more of like how do you infiltrate that industry? So, my time working in the industry, I've got a lot of good friends there. And they're not bad people. They're just not educated or experienced at the level that we are, right? Because they're not boots on the ground guys. They don't deal with the problems every day. And we see that, right? And not to sound arrogant, but every time I walk a property and someone's like, I'm hoping you can tell me why I'm not holding big deer on this property. I'm like, well, I can tell you right now, because all you have is food plots and open timber. right? Like that's pretty straightforward. But what we need to focus on is the long-term health of the system, and that will produce these deer and all these things. And again, I just kind of lay it all out and where it makes more sense to them. But, over the years, I've worked with food plot companies, lots of food plot companies. I know a lot of guys. I've consulted on properties for owners of some of the biggest food plot companies. And they're great, they're good people, right? They're not bad people. And I think across the board, most people aren't inherently stupid or sinister, but we all have a bias. And if our bias is how do I make more money, or how does my business make more money, then it's a slippery slope because you start going down that path and you're just focused on more and more profit. So that's one of the things that's one of the reasons I didn't name my business anything having to do with whitetails or my own name, because it's not about the whitetail itself. It's about the system, and it's not about me. It's about the motivation or the willingness to improve, to renovate or restore and hopefully conserve what we have left, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I went down that path. But back on the food plot side of things, a lot of these guys, I don't want to, I mean, I do at some level lose respect for them, especially if you have a conversation with them and then they still go down that path. But I'm not expecting someone to completely change their business model based on me, right?
Right.
But with food plot companies in general, like I like these guys and I'll support these guys until they start pushing supplemental feed. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not going to like talk bad about them, but I'm not going to promote their products. But why do they promote supplemental feed? They do it because they only make so much money selling seed at certain times of the year. So how do they keep the lights on the rest of the year, right? Well, we buy corn and we mix Kool-Aid with it and we put a big buck on the bag and we ship it across the country, which you've probably heard me say this before too, but I am adamantly opposed to supplemental feeding. I actually don't care if people put bait out from time to time. Like if you're a guy that wants to dump some, I don't believe in it. I don't think it's a good thing, but I would rather see someone dump bait out for a couple weeks out of the year to hopefully kill a deer over a pile of apples or a pile of corn than to think that dumping out thousands and thousands of pounds of corn throughout the season is going to help you have healthier deer and kill bigger bucks. That's a completely different mindset. And for me, that is the antithesis of conservation, because you're literally promoting habitat loss somewhere so that that crop can be grown. And aside from all the chemical inputs and synthetic inputs and the carbon footprint behind all that, right? But ultimately, you're promoting the habitat loss so this crop can be grown, and then it's picked, processed, packaged, and shipped across the country just for you to promote a false sense of carrying capacity on your property, which, like I was saying earlier, further degrades your habitat.
It's a net negative completely across the board, start to finish.
Yeah, let me piggyback on what you were saying. It's funny, I was on social media. I was surfing the other day and somebody had something like, hey, medicated corn to combat ticks. And they had a picture of a bunch of does at a bait pile. And I just sat there and laughed. And the irony of that is just absolutely insane. I got a effing idea. How about kill some damn deer so that way there's not as many hosts out there for these ticks to become as abundant. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah, well, we want deer not to get not that we do, but it's just like all you have to do is harvest, get your population back to where it's supposed to be.
Well, and get rid of the invasives.
What's that?
Get rid of invasives on your property.
It's just based just on that post. It was just like the irony in that post is just absolutely incredible. Why we have so many ticks? Oh, I don't know. It's just because there's so many hosts.
Well, and again, that's part of a system. I think I might have even seen that same post the other day, and I don't scroll a lot, and it's just a flip of a coin if I wake up and choose internet violence or if I want to comment on something or not, because
that's a good word for Cody. He does that. He goes every now and then.
I call them Facebook scraps,
anti-logging or something.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm there, and obviously we share the similar mindset where enough is enough at some point. True, and that little blip in time, it's like, is that going to make an impact? I don't know. I look at it from the perspective of like, if 1,000 people commented on this and I drop that comment in there, if 2 people read that and they're like, oh, wow, that does make sense, then it's a win for me. But to your point, I'm pretty sure I commented on that same Facebook post and said something along those lines. Like, the problem isn't the ticks. The problem is the number of deer, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think I also commented like, and this is it's kind of funny you bring it up because my wife is a health coach manager, and so she works for a company on the West Coast, but she works remotely here in the Midwest. But she's managing all these people, all these different levels of health coaching. A good friend and client of mine is a holistic doctor, owns a holistic medicine practice, him and his wife. And, again, we see both these worlds. So like her health coaching is very much in the conventional medicine side. And she has some autoimmune issues with some arthritis and stuff. And, there's all sorts of different, uh, you know, potential reasons why. Again, you go to conventional medicine and they're like, well, it could be this, could be that. It's definitely genetics. Here, take this pharmaceutical.
Mhm.
And I tore my rotator cuff a few years ago putting up a tree stand on client property. And for like a year and a half, I couldn't raise my arm higher than this.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to go through all of it. And also I was just like super busy. But anyways, I got connected with this holistic guy and we started doing rehab and he fixed my shoulder and then my wife worked with him and he helped her. And a lot of it's just like non-invasive, like let's change your routine and improve the whole system and all these things, right? So I'm a big believer in that. So when it comes to the tick thing, and I explain that to these guys, but where I was going with that is it's funny because, like the internet is, ticks are like the buzzword this year, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
farmers are finding
Ticks
boxes
and
of
data
ticks on their
centers.
property, and Bill Gates is the devil, which he is, by the way.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm like, why do you think we have so many ticks? To your point, Eric, is like we have a pile of deer. That's a huge problem. But also, what I was saying, like similarly to EHD, what's eating ticks? Our bird populations are down by 70 or 80% in some areas.
Preach it.
you
Yeah.
know the biomes have changed, the bacteria have changed so much on the landscape where the beneficial bacteria is not there. There's more non-beneficial bacteria, but we used to have bacteria that would kill ticks when it got in the gut biome of them. It would reduce those populations. You rip a fire through there, you reduce those populations, right? By us, we deal with a lot of Japanese barberry. Japanese barberry is highly conducive to harboring white-bellied mice, which carry Lyme disease. So we know through research that in areas with thickets of Japanese barberry, there's like a 75% higher prevalence of Lyme on the landscape. And like those are the things that we should be addressing because when we address those, we make everything a lot better. But no, we should buy ivermectin coated corn and dump it out there.
It's funny
that's
just
why
to even
I
say
I
out
can't
loud. It
run.
sounds ridiculous just to say out loud.
I can't run farther away from. That's why when Cody and I started to give for grouse, and when we had this thing called the Deer Hunter Project, the writing was on the wall. I can't run farther away from it right now
Yeah.
because of this stuff like this. And
Well,
again, what you just said, it's restoration. It's like how we fix our problems by doing what was like what we did like all the time. We just got, I hate to say this word because it's very aggressive, but lazy,
yeah.
and I don't know if that's even the right word. I don't want to offend anybody because it's so early in the morning,
Well,
but
it's
hey, why not? It's
it's
just,
the sales industry, I think, at the end of the day, right? And that's I try to how do I say this lightly? Capitalism is a great economic model, but it only functions sustainably if the consumer is educated, right? And where the sales industry and especially now with the goldfish attention span, we're all conditioned for the first 3 seconds of scrolling on our phone, grabbing people's attention, hooking them, and now like AI, and just like in general, like it, kind of portraying your situation for something that it's not to sell you on an idea that's not real, but gets you to buy things. And ultimately, what it comes down to is what sells. Sex sells, convenience sells, and solving your problems sells. So, I mean, I don't have the physique to sell by having a low cut shirt on, right? But I
have you
could
tried
still,
though? You haven't tried it, so
I
you
guess I
don't
haven't.
know. You have no
I
idea what's going.
It'd probably be a completely different market. But but ultimately, people are convinced that there's this easy button that they can hit. So like, yeah, I totally, and I've had this conversation before, not with clients, but I'm busy enough now, and I'm trying to kind of work through my own stuff too. Like, how busy do I want to be? Because I don't want to be the guy that is a volume consulting guy. And this kind of goes back to the very beginning of this conversation. I like to do work in the field, and I don't think you can be a good consultant unless you have skin in the game in that sense. So probably 50% of my income, if not more, comes from actually doing the land management stuff. I consult to help write plans, then X percentage of those I help execute and help manage some of those properties. But there's a lot of guys where, you have those conversations and you're like, this is the right way, this is the better way to do it. And then some of them come back and be like, yeah, but I just want to spray it all and put this in
Mm,
there, or I just want to dump out a pile of corn and do that. And like, fine, I get that, but you have to understand that that's not sustainable. And I have walked away from clients before, but more so recently because I'm getting busier, I kind of went down that path like, well, maybe I should hire some people to help me with some of these things and subcontract some things out. Like my process, really what I need is guys that can do like on-site evaluations and then and I'm a big believer in multiple perspectives. Like I like working with other consultants. I like working with foresters and biologists and stuff. I'm not there to be like, no, no, I don't get that. I don't believe in that. Like
yeah.
when we apply logic and science to it, then it's a conversation. You're like, well, this makes more sense because of that. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, whatever. But I've worked with some of these guys, and again, they're good people. They're people that I've known for a long time. But then when you start to get in a little bit deeper, peel back the layers, they're indoctrinated by that model where they're like, well, we
Mm,
got to do this, we got to do that. Like, you don't. This one individual that I was going to hire to help me with some mapping, um, I don't want to expose him too much because I might actually end up working with him in the future. But a lot of good relevant experience. Worked for NRCS, a lot of GIS mapping, a lot of good relevant experience. And I respect this person. They definitely know what they're doing. But I walked a property with them, and when it was all said and done, and I was working with the client, they were like, I love what you're doing. You're great at what you do. You're great at explaining these things, but I just don't believe that that will work. Like I haven't seen that work. I was like, well, what do you mean? And what we were talking about was prescribed fire for invasive management and reducing chemicals on food plots. And I was like, how do you think these things were managed prior to all these chemicals and stuff like that, right? And again, there are two different lanes there because I'm not anti-chemical entirely, and we need that on the landscape for the invasives. But basically, what it came down to was they were kind of convinced or indoctrinated with this conventional mindset. And on the invasive side of things, with fire, and this is kind of where that mindset came from. In the last 5 years, I've worked with a lot of foresters, and 5 years ago, when I would say, our goal is to get ahead of these invasives and keep them at bay with fire. 5 years ago, most of these foresters in this area would be like, well, the conventional mindset is fire is not enough to stop invasives. So like I'm under an EQIP contract for my property here, and you guys are obviously familiar with EQIP, and I'm sure
yeah.
your listeners are. Environmental Quality Improvement Program, I think is the acronym, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, the contract was to remove the invasives, and per the contract, you have to follow the management plan that was put together by the state forester, the county forester. Well, this is a big hillside that wraps around my house. Our garden is here. Dogs play in the woods. Kids play in the woods. And the prescription for it was basil bark treatment on an insanely high stem count of buckthorn and honeysuckle and multiflora rose and barberry. And actually, there's some burning bush in there, and God knows what else, right? Everything I'd
Yeah.
escaped from landscaping in the
Right.
neighborhood. But basically, what it came down to was I'm not against like cutting and treating, but you're talking like a bazillion little seedlings in there. I'm like, I'm not gonna spray all those things out. And
Mm,
then when I talked to NRCS, I was like, you gave me a 3-year plan. My contract is in 3 years. I've got 3 rounds of treatment, which again is totally acceptable. But then, what do we do after that? Am I just supposed to wait 5, 10 years? Because all my neighbors' properties still have all the invasives on it. So I just
mm,
wait 5, 10 years until it gets bad again, re-enroll and equip, and then you pay me to go spray everything again? Or how do I get in a management routine to keep this stuff out of here? And I said, I want to use fire as much as possible. Well, the conventional mindset is that fire is not enough to keep them at bay. So I've been trying to prove them wrong as much as possible, right?
right.
And
Yeah.
and I have seen that. But what's funny is just a couple years ago, we had the opportunity to buy the next door property, just another small lot, and kind of absorb that into the plan. And I had the same forester out, 4 or 5 years removed, had the same forester out, And I asked him the same questions again. And he's like, yeah, fire works really well for that. I was like, okay, okay. So we're
Yeah.
making progress, right? But I say that because Eric, you say, you want to remove yourself as much as possible from this deer hunting world. And I, most days when I wake up, if I wake up and scroll at all or, go down that rabbit hole where you see all that stuff, I feel exactly the same way. But I also firmly believe that guys like us have to stay rooted in this and stay firm and not get absorbed by it because we have to be a voice that says, no, that's not actually the only way, right? And this is a way that we can do things that are better for the resource. It's not as flashy, right? Not up front. Like holistic management's not a flashy thing. Holistic management's like that the girl at the party that's not all dressed up in fancy clothes with the makeup or the low cut shirt, right? But she's the
Hmm.
one that is tried and true and is really the one that you want to spend your life with because
Yeah.
she's not, hiding some crazy in the closet, right? And that's what conventional management is like what's fancy, what looks really good, what can I do right now, right? Buying 25 trail cameras doesn't make you a better deer hunter. It doesn't make better deer habitat, but it might be useful, but it's a short-term thing, right? Improving native habitat, improving cover, improving forage value on your property makes better habitat. Those are like the things that are harder to obtain, but the reward from them so much better. And again, kind of all the way back to the beginning, it's like time and consistency plus management equals success. And that's kind of been my mantra the whole time. It's like, I'm not chasing this. I don't do any marketing. I mean, I'm thankful to be on podcasts like this. This is my marketing, right? But I enjoy having these conversations with like-minded people. But I don't like slam the social media with ads all the time because I want 150 clients a year so I can just burn through them. I want to go to the property and I what I get the most reward from is walking that property with the guy that just wants to kill big deer and at the end of the day he's really interested in growing butterfly habitat or
Hmm.
bird habitat. You're telling me that I could have grouse on this property again? You're telling me I could have quail on this property again? Like, yeah, I'm telling you all these things are achievable. It's not going to happen overnight, but we can get there, right? So I say that again because it is hard. Carol, the owner who passed away last year, a couple years ago, the owner of Hoxie Native Seed, he would always say that in this business you have to be an optimist. You have to be an
Hmm.
optimist, right? And it's so true. It's so true because everything is going against us as environmentalists, right? And that's the other thing. I see myself as a frontline environmentalist, not the standing with picket line with signs saying that cows are bad or hunting's bad, but the guys that are actually out there like this is an environmental issue right here right now and it might be on a 3 acre chunk or it might be on a 500 acre watershed, right? But these are environmental issues that we're facing and however we can connect that to whoever is going to fund it is kind of how I approach it. It's like, okay, you're the guy that's paying these bills. These are the problems we need to solve to get ahead of these other problems down the road. And as long as in their brain it comes back around to like, okay, so that's going to say I'm going to kill bigger deer and my kids are going to have the chance to kill big deer too, I'm in. They're like, all
Hmm.
right, we're good. Let's go.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit. I want to come back to this conversation, but I got to let my blood pressure go back down a little bit. We'll circle back when I calm down a little bit. Um, what county are you in Wisconsin?
I live in La Crosse County, but I hunt mostly Vernon County.
Okay. I had a client many moons ago. I cannot pronounce it, just to the north of what's that? How
Trempealeau. Yep.
Trempealeau,
Trempealeau.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful area. And back then, of course, grouse wasn't, on my mind or anything like that. But Cody asked me that a couple weeks ago if it reminded me of like where I live in Ohio. It did look grousey, but it was just, I never thought to ask. I never, anything like that. So in your area there, I mean, the obvious question is do you have grouse or are
Not
people working toward it? Is the state a series of questions I'm going to shoot at you? Is the state working to acknowledge it other than the Northwoods,
yeah.
where woods are and all this other stuff?
That's about it. I mean, I go up north quite a bit for, either consulting, or I was just up in southern Ontario bear hunting, and, the grouse are up there going crazy,
Hmm.
especially this time of year, drumming all over. But no, down here, southwestern corner. So to kind of paint the picture for anyone listening, I'm in Lacrosse County, the next county south, and this is all jammed on the west side of Wisconsin up against the
Hmm.
Mississippi. So the next county south is Vernon. If you go north one county, that's Trempealeau. North one county is the infamous Buffalo County,
Buffalo.
right?
Yeah,
So that's like the core whitetail mecca, if you want to call it that. Buffalo counties went downhill dramatically in the last 10 years or so from the outfitter effect.
probably longer than that,
Yeah,
Thomas.
probably
Jeez,
longer than that.
Pete's.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really went
Yeah.
downhill. Guys are there's just it's just not really great management up there anymore because of
Hmm.
that. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right? But on the grouse side of things, no one talks about grouse down here. No one. I
Yeah.
never hear anyone talk about grouse.
Hmm.
And I don't put a huge emphasis on grouse specifically, but I do emphasize ground nesting birds and birds. And one of the things I think is the issue, and you guys can tell me what you think, but my theory, one of the issues why our grouse populations are down so much. I mean, once in a while we'll see grouse on our farm, but not consistently. We rarely hear them drum, and it used to be kind of that cycle where for a few years it'd be heavy and then kind of lull. But I think the big issue is, which and you guys know, is the timber industry and that side of
Yeah.
things. The problem by us is, a lot of our timber makeup is oak, hickory, savannas, a lot of maple, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of aspen. There is a lot of different
Hmm.
aspen and poplar, but it's never managed for that.
Mm.
And what happened, and again, this is another example of how conventional thoughts change over time with foresters. 30 years ago, we have managed forest law in Wisconsin, MFL.
Mm.
So you get, if you enroll in MFL, you get a reduced tax basis or a set tax rate for your acreage. And there's open
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
MFL
Yeah.
where you can allow public hunting, and there's closed MFL. But MFL foresters, you're in some sort of a management plan. 30 years ago, it was always, select cut every X number of years. Well, that went off the rails, right? So guys go in and they do a select cut, basically high grade the timber, and then the canopy closes up, and all you get is, a ton of understory trees and no, regeneration in general, or you open it up a lot and it becomes all invasives because again, there's no follow up to that management plan. It's just cut this and wait 30 years and then we'll cut it again. Now things have changed for the better, I think. But ultimately, a lot of the poplar and aspen stands are kind of dying out because when people log, if they just get a logger in there, logger looks at it and goes, well, you've got some walnut here. That's obviously high value timber. You've got some oaks here. That's pretty good value timber. And there's these other trees that we can fill a truckload with. And, we're going to selectively harvest some aspen out of there. Like,
Mm.
that doesn't really work, right? Like, and again, for the people listening, and what we do now, and make sure we do now, is we're, group cutting or clear cutting, patch cutting these areas of aspen because aspen regenerates off the root system, right? It's a colonial species, regenerates off the root system, and that's triggered. It's a hormonal response triggered by the temperature of the soil. So it has to get full sun to the ground, right? It's not like we cut this thing and it stump sprouts like a maple or a hickory. We got to get enough sunlight in there. So when these guys are just doing these like little select cuts or focusing entirely on other species and ignoring the aspen, and I still come across this frequently where a logging plan, even with a forester, will just be like, we're doing select cuts on this, and you can cut some of these aspen, but not a heavy cut to regenerate the aspen. And then the aspen just kind of dies off. So most of, I would say, yeah, probably 60 to 70% of the properties I'm on, when we do find these little stands of poplar or aspen, they're old. They've got the
Mm.
conchs on them where they're starting to deteriorate, and they're way over mature. So that's a lot of the times that's one of the first things I'll address. Like, well, first of all, we need to clear cut this whole spot. Like, we got to cut this heavy because we want to save that stand of aspen. But from the timber industry, especially down here, we don't have any pulp mills, so there's very little value. And with the economy the way it's been, really since COVID, when things started to really clamp down, the the pallet industry has shut
Mm.
down, and there was a couple mills around here that would buy aspen and mill it down and build pallets out of it, and that's kind of shut down. They still take them from time to time, but and again, then from a management standpoint, And I still tell guys this, I'm like, if we can clear cut that and break even, so we're paying someone to improve our habitat, but you're not expecting a big fat check from the timber harvest. But if we can clear cut that and get it out of here and break even on it, that's a huge win. And if we have to pay $600 an acre, that's still a big win, right? Because
Mhm.
that's the advantage that we gain from clear cutting that aspen and regenerating that from a wildlife standpoint. Deer obviously is their focus, but obviously grouse and all the things that come with it. I think that's a big part of it. So to answer your question, no, grouse aren't on a lot of people's minds. I wish that they were. I love it. I'm not a giant bird hunter. I got this dog. Really, I just wanted a good dog that could follow me around the woods and was smart and trainable. And a client of mine pushed me towards this Drothar, and he's been a great dog. But watching him in the woods, watching him go on, just purely instinctual, like go on point and flush birds and stuff, makes me want to promote more grouse and more birds selfishly because I want to go on these properties and see more grouse and more birds, right? I was on the property I was on the other days in Richland County, which is the next county south of Vernon. That one, it was a gorgeous property. It kind of breaks off into this river bottom and rolling hills in a unique situation. This kind of might give you an example of some of my clientele too. Not all of them, but I've got more and more of these coming up where it's two brothers and the father that bought this property, and one brother wants to get into regenerative farming, regenerative grazing. So like all the tillable and stuff on there is all going into pasture. And then we integrate those systems with the wildlife system. So the cattle are used as a form of disturbance through certain areas at certain times of the year, or every so many years. But anyways, we were on that property, we were walking around, and I've never seen it. I've never had it happen before. But this was out in the middle of this wide open field, like I mean, hundreds of yards away from the woods, and I just about stepped on a woodcock, like
Mhm.
literally almost stepped on it. And then actually, the two of them flew up. And then after I was like looking around, there was another one I saw, and it was sitting really tight. And but it was cool. We flushed those, and they fly really funny, and they don't fly very far, and they land.
Yeah.
And these guys are like, "That's wild! Like that's the coolest thing ever!" And like that little bit of an experience, I was like, if we manage this way, there's no reason we can't get quail back on this property. There's plenty of open space. There's plenty of grassland areas. And he actually initially, when I got there, he was like, I want to maintain or I want to get some of this in true grassland habitat. And, that really got him excited. And then, I mentioned the grouse thing. I was like, well, you've got the timber to do this. We just have to cut it correctly. Like, we should be able to get these animals back in here in time. And the property's big enough, too. So, sorry, that was a long way of answering your question. That
No,
there's
that's
not a
fine.
lot to talk about grouse, but if I have anything to say about it, I'm pushing for it because there's such interesting animals. And again, I feel like part of my job is just to get people to think about deer, but not make it their sole focus. Like that is a positive byproduct of what we're trying to accomplish with
Yeah.
this greater ecosystem.
Mhm. Yeah. So the logging industry in that area, I mean, are there mills, not like paper mills, but actual like logging mills and stuff? So there is logging going on in that part of the world.
Yeah, there's lots of mills, plenty of loggers, but it, it becomes challenging because there's not as much timber. That's a big thing. There's not as much habitat as there used to be, and there's not as much regenerating as there used to be.
Mhm.
I've got a handful of loggers I work with pretty consistently that are, I've come to know over the years, and I think I've changed their perspective or they just know how to work with me because they know when I'm on a property with them or if I call them, they never turn down jobs, so I know I'm keeping them happy enough, right? But ultimately, they know I'm not going to let them just go in there and cut all the biggest, best trees that they want to cut. We're and a lot of times I mean, I would say 50% of the properties plans we put together, the logging plan will be, maybe some diameter cuts or a bunch of clear cuts, but the majority of it, I'll say no oaks. We're not cutting any oaks because there's just not many oaks because they were select cut and then nothing regenerated. And now we're just down to like the last handful of these monster oaks that we need to get the seed source out and actually, get regeneration going and everything. But the the loggers themselves, what I've learned, there's good loggers, there's bad loggers, just like there's good consultants and bad consultants and good car salesmen and bad car salesmen, right? There's good and bad in every demographic. But what I've learned and really come to appreciate over the last, probably 3 or 4 years especially, is these loggers, the good loggers anyway, they kind of act, or I don't want to say they portray themselves. This is kind of how I see them, but they kind of act as like shepherds of the land, of the timber. And what's really cool to me is you'll get these guys. Like I work with some really young loggers. Like I've got a guy that I work with back in Vernon County that I went to high school with. He's a year older than me, and then he got into logging and bought the business from his boss and took it over. And I work with some of these guys that have been logging for 40, 50 years in other areas. But when you can tell a good logger is when they say something like, "Oh yeah, I cut that property 30 years ago, and I made sure we did this, so things should be good." And then you walk that property, and you're like, "Yeah, the regen is actually really good in this property." Or a newer logger, and you walk it, and he'll be like, "Well, we don't want to do this right now, or we want to wait until this season so that we're not tearing up the ground so much." And like that's usually my MO is like, we're not logging right now because we don't want that type of ground disturbance. We just want to get the timber out. But then these guys kind of catch on to that, or they already look at it that way. But they're anticipating another round 20, 30 years from now. And those are the guys I really like to work with because in Brogan is his name, the high school classmate of mine. He's even said it. He's like, I'll travel a distance if I have to, but I don't have to. And he's like, if you look at these loggers that are traveling great distances, there's usually a reason why. And that's because they've tarnished their reputation locally. They went in and high graded the woods or left it a huge mess, and then no one wants to come back. So they have to kind of expand their bubble, where these other guys become, again, like a shepherd of the timber, where they're there, they take care of it, and then they leave, and they anticipate being back on that property 20, 30 years from now to do it again. And that's what I really appreciate with those guys. But there's plenty of mills, there's plenty of loggers, but it's a challenge to get good loggers on your property because they are backed up multiple years. And that again goes back to the mindset I try to instill in these guys, which is be patient. This isn't something where you have to have the plan and execute it immediately, right? There's low hanging fruit we can chisel away at, and it's not worth getting some fly by night logger to come in and butcher your property. We want to have a good plan, and we want someone that we can trust to work with and take care of the land, because again they see themselves as being that steward that's going to be back there to help again the next round. So it is interesting, where we are, and I'm guessing where you guys are too. You deal with pretty wild terrain issues, right? Like,
yeah,
that's the challenge is, and not only the terrain, but access. So it's like, well, if I came across this guy's field, this would be really easy access, but that neighbor won't let you cross the field because maybe he's a hunter too, and he doesn't want you to log yours, or this other mentality of, I don't want to say this in a negative way, but more of like the save the trees mentality, where like we can't cut anything because that's bad. So, there's middle ground. But I'm curious, like, what you guys deal with where you are with the logging industry and everything.
It's, well, I don't know. I've said it on just about every podcast we've had. Where I'm at, Thomas, Western Virginia, right on the West Virginia line, we have a hardwood pulp and paper mill that has been in existence for almost 100 years, I think. Nice. My grandfather worked there. My dad worked there. I am the 1% of my community who looks at things this way. I hope not, working to change that, but we are very fortunate to have that for a lot of different reasons. The community, the economy aspect, obviously with the mill, all the people that the mill employs, and then the trickle down effect off of that. We have big logging outfits. We have small logging outfits that employs foresters, that employs truck drivers, so there's that stimulus into the economy. But with the habitat and wildlife aspect of things, we can create, because we can move so much wood. And, I guess, as pulpwood's not good timber. And just speaking to our forest aspect, we don't traditionally grow really good timber here in the mountains. Like, we're straight up and down, rocky, shaly, poor quality soil. So it's just even mature woodlands, it's scraggly. twisted, ugly looking timber. But because we have that hardwood pulp and paper mill, like we can move a lot of wood, which allows us to put habitat on the ground at scale. This hardwood pulp and paper mill brings in pulp wood from an average distance of 100 miles every single day. So that's, people are cutting 5 miles up the road to get that 100-mile average. Somebody's got to be bringing in pulp wood from 200 miles, so that's a lot of wood coming in, feeding that mill. My dad used to work there. I'm sure it fluctuates with everything, like everything goes up and down, but when it's running well, it's 100 clear-cut acres a day to feed the mill, which, you drive around here, and again, you drive the highway, the interstate, you got, mountain views, 360 degrees looking around, and it's still closed canopy forest, most of it. And you're like, how are there any trees left standing if that mill's getting fed 100 clear-cut acres a day? All that to say, my entire community, the entire economy is built on the backs of that paper mill and of loggers. And so we're fortunate to have that pulp mill still in existence, because especially across the Southeast, pulp mills are just we're not even exclusive to the Southeast. Pulp mills are dropping like flies all across the country. The forest product market is just in a downward trajectory all across the country. That mill, it is still, to the best of my knowledge, singing like a robin on a spring morning. And again, I grew up here. Most people, you're kind of born and raised here. Not a lot of people move to the Allegheny Highlands. So we're numb to the fact, I think, a little bit spoiled, because it's what we've always known. We've never experienced it not being here. So that's part of what I'm trying to do here locally is to try to raise awareness and get people to understand, like, guys, we are very fortunate. And most people do understand that because so many people have worked at the mill, or they have families who have worked at the mill. So they understand that and they're grateful for it. I'm just trying to get people to kind of, broaden their, look at what this mill does for us, economically and ecologically. But it's from a wildlife perspective, and especially for grouse and other early successional young forest wildlife, they've got to be so thankful that we have that mill, because without it, so much of this wood would just be standing here, and we can burn it. So much of our forests, as they need a disturbance, whether that's timber or fire, so we can burn it, and that's a big point for it. And we should be burning more of our landscape than what we are. But to be able to take wood off the landscape, turn it into a product, create habitat in the process, feed the economy, all in one. That's what we advocate for. That's what we exist to do, is to to support all that goes into that.
Yeah, and almost similar to Cody, but not. It's in Ohio, the logging community was pretty strong, and instead of the paper mill aspect of it, is furniture in Ohio, because of the strong Amish communities from almost Lake Erie all the way down to south central part of the state. Big Amish community. The area that I do a lot of work in is the biggest Amish community in the whole world. So a lot of furniture makers, a lot of like the whole components, man. It's very impressive, but therefore you have a lot of logging companies. And lately, a lot of those logging companies, I think at one point there was like, man, don't quote me on this number, almost like 40 and 2 counties. Well, that got flushed out because of the market, and only the strong ones survived. Mm-hmm. But when they go into a piece of property, since we don't have what Cody has, paper mill, you're doing a very select cut and not high grading. It feels like those days are completely over in a sense, but it's just not enough. Like it's just enough for like deer management, it's just not enough. You're getting sunlight hit the forest floor, but in Ohio, you cut a tree down, you have invasives, man. That's like that everywhere, but it feels like Ohio, it's just waiting for, that to happen. And, trying to educate people about invasives. There's quite a few companies that have been popping up doing invasive control. that are just overwhelmed with work because of CAUV. That ours is, instead of the what you said, a program, we have this thing. It's
Managed
called
force one.
CAUV. Yeah,
Okay.
CAUV, where you have to show signs of doing invasive control, etc. So companies have popped up, but they're just a grain of sand on a beach. But yeah, it's like things are getting logged, but it's just getting logged, and it's not enough to sustain a grouse population. It's in many cases, it's if it does get a heavy cut, it's too late, and it's frustrating. We even to say we've had several people on saying patch clear cuts, and it's like that's not anything's possible, obviously, but like a logger's not going to come in and do a patch clear cut because there's no market for X,
Yeah.
and it's all market driven. And I was with a logger the other day, and the only thing that was worth any money, it was obviously walnut. And where do you find walnut anymore? So plenty oak, which is very low dollar anymore. Red maple, pallet wood. There's still a lot of pallet places getting softwood and stuff on the ground, but it's just not enough, and that's what's frustrating. And the whole Appalachia region is what Cody and I are trying to save the world, if you will. But it's cool. It's different because he's got the paper mill industry down there. Even the ones that are closed. Where here, it's a whole different why we're cutting, but still the same result. Trying to educate people on to do better.
Well, so. Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll come back around. The demand for natural products.
You said you got to be an optimist, Thomas. Maybe? That didn't sound optimistic.
You know what? That was so believable. I'm on the brain.
I say that because I there is a change taking place, but it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know, right? It's like,
right.
For the most part, I try to stay in my bubble, and we know, like, when you're in social media, like, you're in an echo chamber. So, but like, case in point, I remodeled our kitchen here a couple of years ago, and a friend of our family is an interior designer and stuff, so she helped us put together a plan. And when it came to the flooring, she was like, "Oh, we can get a really high-end LVL, laminate vinyl flooring or engineered vinyl flooring, and it's got, a 30-year warranty and this and that, and it's cheaper than wood." And I was like, "I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm like, we're putting a wood floor in." Like, it'd be pretty hypocritical of me to be promoting natural products in the timber industry and then go buy fucking plastic for my floor. Like, that's
it's
not
so
my
funny.
role.
It's so funny to say that because my wife dragged me to IKEA and I snapped a photo, sent it to Cody. I said, I feel like such a traitor. And just the other day, I actually thought of Cody. I didn't tell you this. I paid for something and they said, "You want a receipt?" And I said, "No." And I swear to you, this happened. I thought of Cody when he's at an airport or something, and the paper towels that come out, he'll just like suck it dry with the paper towel. I turned around and told the lady, "Yes, I want a paper receipt."
And I want a gift receipt too.
I'm like, I will take that 6 inches of paper. I will take it.
Isn't it funny? When I was in high school, I guess, or maybe even younger, I'm going on 40. That was like, don't use paper, save the trees. Yeah. And then what's the message now? It's like, oh, plastic's so much better. Let's replace everything with some poly whatever compound. Yeah. And then we lose the appreciation for the trees when, again, like, that's the message, which I think we all understand that more now, especially the last few years. And this kind of goes back to that, like, sales industry side of things. But now it's really just like Big Brother, like, convincing you to go down this path because that is like the elite level of sales. Well, if we can convince the whole country that we shouldn't cut any trees down and we should use plastic products because that's way better, right? And then we know, like, in the flooring thing is a good example of that. You look at the research on that and, like, all the off-gassing that comes from all these, like, because I worked in construction for a while too. And it's like, I don't want my kids in a house that they're soaking up all of these nasty adhesive gases and stuff like that. And again, I like wood and it feels good. I like walking barefoot on a wood floor. It feels good, right? And that's that's what we're missing, right? So many people are missing whatever connection they can get to nature in any way, shape, or form. They're missing that when they wake up on concrete or on plastic, and that their daily life is breathing this like stale, toxic air in their house, and they don't hear the bird noises. We don't. If anything, if I'm trying to accomplish anything with what I do, it's that we don't go down the path where that's normal, right? We need that element of nature in our lives. It cracks me up. Like the IKEA thing cracks me up because you go in there and it's largely, and not that I've shopped in IKEA a lot, right? I obviously try to avoid it, but it's the things that you see in an IKEA or any of those types of stores, where it's like like a fox deer head, like a white deer head or fake antlers and stuff like that, or like a picture of birds or, all these things. It's like, cool. So you guys appreciate nature, but you only appreciate it in this like very sterile sense, or it's like a very clean, modern vibe where like my house, obviously you look around, like there's dead shit hanging on the wall. But it's not, actually the other day, and this is something that, not everyone would appreciate, and I'm sure someone listening to this is gonna be like, that's weird. I'm saying this as I'm sitting here looking at a baby fox that I've got taxidermied on the wall that found dead. The other day when I was driving back from Canada, I came across a road-killed bear cub, like probably 5 minutes dead. Like it was like still warm, ticks still crawling all over it. And my buddy is a fanatic bear hunter. Fanatic. He's killed 55 black bears, 2 grizzlies, and a polar bear. Like obsessive bear hunter, but hardcore conservationist. The guy, all of his money goes into land restoration and hunting and stuff like that. So I saw that. I pulled over, called the DNR, got a salvage permit, picked it up, took it to him because I know he's wanted to have one in his display room, which seems really morbid, right? I'm not going to go out of my way and kill a bear cub. But to me, it's preservation of beauty. And as sad as it is to say, at some point in time, if we, the front line boots on the ground environmentalists, don't win, essentially, if we don't get ahead of it, at some point in time, we're going to look back and that's all it's going to be as a memory. Oh, we used to have those animals. We used to have those animals, right? And it's this that snowballing effect. But ultimately, it's this like societal conditioning to distract us. And I see it with my kids. I've got a 5-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. And obviously, like they're outdoorsy, they're with me all the time. But their friends will come over and they're like, "You want to play outside? Ew, there's bugs out there." Like, well, you're not going to be playing video games in our house because we don't have them. So you can go get dirty, or you can sit here and look out the window.
Here's a bow, kid. Go shoot an arrow up in the sky and run away from it like we did.
Yeah, the things that we used to do, right? Yeah, exactly. And again, like you have to give them that level of appreciation, but it trickles down. So like if the parent doesn't like it or appreciate it, and I say this all the time too, it's like I don't, the same way that people don't have to be farmers or raise their own food, at the very least they need to appreciate and understand where your food comes from. And the same with hunters and conservationists. Like you don't have to be a hunter. And there's plenty of people out there that aren't fans of hunting, right? Oh, you say you love animals, but then you go out and kill them, right? I understand the argument at some level, but no one has a deeper appreciation for wildlife than true conservationists that hunt, right?
Yeah. It's the problem. Last couple times I've talked to somebody about, logging and everything. I was talking to a lovely lady. She actually called me, talked to me about the grouse stuff that Cody and I were doing. And she wanted, and I said, listen to our podcast, listen to this guy, especially blah, blah, blah. And everything is just so tribal in the sense of everything we do goes to politics. And she was like, listening to you, guys, the first time, I thought, okay, you guys are just right-wing nuts, conservative, and that's okay. I have to be against that. And that's like a big hurdle that this is not tribal. This is about wildlife. The same thing that you love, I love it. Not to get in a who loves more argument, but I can almost debate you that I care about it a little bit more. Yeah. Not that I'm better or whatever, but we instantly turn things into political, tribal, that's a right wing issue. That's what they're for. Lefts are save the tree, hug it, do whatever you need. And it's like, no, man, we're on the same page. How do we break that tribalism in a sense of, 'cause that's the world we live in. Everything is right and left and middle and all that stuff. And what a time period to try to save a species when you have those type of hurdles on top of everything else. Because you said yourself when you were a kid, you know, I drive probably Cody enough crazy enough because I always say, man, Gen Millennial and Gen Z, my son's generation, I mean, trying to convince them that, this is the right path. I think it's achievable, but again, it's like, there's something that we're missing that they'll grab a hold to,
Yeah.
and Cody and I are just starting out. Maybe we are saying the right thing. It just hasn't gotten out there to them. And trying to convince Cody to get in some shorty shorts, running a chainsaw to make it sexy again. I can't get him to do it. So
I think we're going to need to put together maybe like a land manager's calendar or something.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like different seasons of the year, different attire. You can wear the daisy
thinking
dukes in
habitat
the
sexy.
summer.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's do her.
Yeah. No, it is. It's challenging, and again, I you can only influence what you can influence, right?
Yeah.
So like for me, I'll say this from time to time too, where it's like if you want to save the world, you have to start with your own backyard, or you have to start at home. You have to start at home, period, right? Like it'd be very hypocritical for me to go out and say this thing to try to present this message or present myself a certain way, and then come home and take the easy route, let my kids slough off and do these things. And again, and we have control over that at some level, especially with our children, where they want to do the fun thing, the flashy thing, the exciting thing, because that's what their friends are doing. But at the same time, like when you really immerse them in the outdoors and in nature, then they can suck their friends into it. So it like they can be the influence in their own like little bubble or sphere, right? And that's what I really strive for. So like my son's a good example, and this is another thing actually to back up a second. It's like another big issue with this whole like whitetail industrial complex or like the world I live in, the space of like whitetail land management, whitetail consulting. One of the biggest issues I actually have with it is this like possessive mindset where like it's my property, I've managed for these deer, they're my deer. So people don't get along with their neighbors anymore. And some of these consultants are putting plans together to put fences up. I see them all the time, like an 8 foot high deer fence across one or two sides of the property to create
What?
isolation because they've got a bad neighbor that doesn't want to follow the same management protocols. Like that's part of it. But the bigger thing to me that drives me nuts is these guys that, I look at them, they're the same age as me. They've got kids the same age as mine, but they won't allow their kids to go squirrel hunting or build a fort in the woods because it's going to put pressure on their deer. And I get that at some level, but at the same time, it's like if you want the next generation to despise, not just ignore, but despise the resource and what we're trying to achieve, then make it this like high stakes game and put all this pressure on them and take it super serious all the time, right? Like I take deer hunting as serious as anyone. These big deer that I've killed were not easy. None of them were box blind, slam dunk over a food plot hunts. They're like wake up at 3 in the morning and stare at the ceiling until you can visualize every topography line on the property and understand how the air is going to flow. And go, oh, I think under these conditions I can get in there and do this, and then again go try and prove or disprove that theory. But with these kids especially, like you want them to enjoy it and get as much out of it as possible. And my kids, they eat it up right now. A lot of it is they just want to be with dad, right? They want to see what dad does. My son is 9 years old, and if you ask him today what he wants to do when he grows up, he wants to work for me. That's what he says. Like, well, like that's funny because when I get you out and have you do some projects, like halfway through, you're talking about just doing this, or you end up down in the creek and you're playing in the creek and you're not picking up rocks or planting
Yeah.
trees, right? But that's
Yeah.
fine, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you want. You want them to enjoy that. The same way, like, when I was a kid, like I said, I born in a barn, raised in the woods. Like I used to, I mean, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but I've killed a lot of animals in my time with BB guns and 22s, right? And that like you learn that appreciation or you develop that appreciation for nature spending time out there. And in the grand scheme of things, like I spend an entire day in the woods and I kill 4 squirrels. Like that's really not a lot of carnage, right? It's not like you're just blindly massacring everything that you see. Although my kids do have a green light to kill every sparrow that's on the bird feeder, right? If they can hit it with their pellet gun. But point being is like you want them to engage in that. You want them to have fun with it and not be so serious
Well,
that they're like, oh, this is too strict. I don't want to deal with it.
yeah. Well, that's the funny thing is that we got these kids, we so badly want them to enjoy what we're doing, and all we're doing is deer hunting.
Yeah.
And kids' attention span, my son, it was just like I remember coming home and telling my wife like that we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Like if you want him to be into this, you're doing it. I remember having that conversation, and then the next time it's like you get the stick out of your butt and just have fun.
Yeah.
We took the iPad, bag of Doritos, and we were laughing and joking and having a good time. But still, my son, he loves to hunt, but he's not a hunter, and there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I think it's like I remember growing up, it was a pack mentality type of huntings. Like you didn't just go squirrel hunting by yourself. You went with friends. When you deer hunted, it was like a bigger group, and Uncle Jimmy smelled like Jack Daniels. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was fun to listen to all these grown-ups laugh and make fun of one another. It was like, oh, you could not wait. Hey, you want to go hunting? You damn right I do. You want to go rabbit hunting? Damn right I do. Because I know we're going to go out and I'm going to see my brother get made fun of, and we're going to go to this diner afterwards, and it's going to be a blast. Now you know what? It's like, here, put this clothes on, shut your hole, and stare at what?
Well,
They have no connection with any of this.
and the camaraderie side of it is what made it what it was, right? And
Right?
we've lost that so much to your point.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it at that level, but you think about it, like most of these mature deer hunters, they are the lone wolves that, and part of it too,
Hmm.
this conservation space is a very lonely space, right? Like the mindset's very lonely. And you guys know, like again, we're in our own little bubble right here having conversations because we all share the same
Yeah.
mindset. But if I, another example, love her to death, fantastic woman. My mother-in-law came up one day, I think it was last summer or last fall, and she took my wife to a local farmers market, and they just like had their day, right? And they came home with these fancy vases or vases. I don't know how you say that plural, but
Yeah.
but they're
Vases.
full of these like ornamental grasses with all like
Yeah.
the seed heads and the prawns and stuff on there. And they brought them home, and I was like, they're sitting outside on the back deck with these, and the wind's kind of blowing. I can see like little pieces coming
Mm.
off, and I was like, hey, like that goes inside or that goes in the garbage. And she just was like, what are you saying? I was like, that is an invasive grass. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it's sterile. I don't know, but it's not a risk I'm willing to take, letting that blow around my backyard. Like it's those little things like that. Like I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I also work my tail off to stop these things from spreading across the property. So keep it
Yeah.
inside. It's like those little things, but people just don't understand. And
Yeah.
to back up on the kids side of things and the camaraderie, same thing with my kids. It's like, I want them to have fun. And I'm not a giant box blind guy, but I've put box blinds out across our property over the years just for that. So now, like in the fall, if the kids have off school, my wife works from home. My schedule is relatively flexible, especially in the fall when my clients are hunting. I'm not working on their properties. So I'll be like, let's just go jump in a blind for a day. Like it might not be the best conditions. We're not really planning on seeing a whole lot, but we'll just hang out in tight corridors together, or
Mhm.
chambers, and iPad, notepad, a lot of hangman, a lot of tic-tac-toe, stuff like that. And we have fun. We always have fun. My son actually, I mean, I joke around with my cousins that hunt the property too, because my son puts more time in than they do. I mean,
Hmm.
last year we didn't hunt as much because I tagged out relatively early, and and he had a bunch of other stuff going on, but he's put in 2 or 3 full day sits last year. The year before, 4 or 5, and we're talking like dawn till dark in a box blind, and just like figure it out. Bag of snacks, some
Yeah.
chips, some
Yep.
drinks or whatever. But the where I was going with that is our group. So our family group, kind of the same thing. It's like a bunch of uncles and cousins, extended family. My dad comes from a really big family. I I hit this point with them where I started to see things for what they were, and they might argue a different perspective on that. But it's our farm, my dad's farm. I grew up on it. I grew up working on it. When it came to wildlife management, I put in all the time. I was the only one putting in the time. Like the farm itself, my dad, like he, is solely focused on the things that make money on that farm. So trying to get him to invest money into wildlife habitat is a conversation that it's completely pointless. I just finally, in the last few years, got him to log more in certain areas. So there's hope there. But then, we had this plan laid out and we got to year 2 of it. He's like, oh, we logged too much last year. We got to take a couple years off, right? But these 17 other guys that show up on the property, and we have so much fun, and so many great memories that were made over the years, starting with, everyone coming and sleeping in campers to eventually built a cabin and all the things. But then we hit this point, and for me, and I say this to other guys too, it's like your brain changes. Do you have kids, Cody?
Not that I know of. No.
Yeah, not that I know of. So Eric, I mean, you could probably relate to this, and maybe hopefully someday, Cody, you can relate to this, right? But it's like your brain changes when you have kids because now you're not, and I shouldn't say this is for everyone, right? But a lot of times it is. Like now you're not just like solely thinking about you and your path forward, but now you're taking along someone else on this journey. And for me, one of the biggest changes was my perspective where my time goes. So I used to put in so much time and so much money on the property. And then when my wife and I were expecting our first child, I knew that that time was limited. And because I knew that I was going to prioritize my family over these other things. But at the same time, I look at this group of people and I'm like, there's no reason out of this group of people coming and using this land that we can't still have all these great things. It shouldn't be on my back all the time, right? And I had a conversation with them, and it turned out to be a very heated conversation because it was like 5 consecutive years leading up to this where I was like, hey, like I'm doing all these things. I'm spending all this money. Yes, I'm having the success, but do you guys ever take a second to step back and think and that, maybe my success comes from the time I put in and not he's just the luckiest hunter because that was their mindset forever. He's just so lucky, right? Because we've been hunting for 30 years and he just shows up and kills the biggest buck on the farm, right? But ultimately what it came down to, I was just like, hey, like we can't keep doing things the way we're doing it. Like the way you guys are showing up the day before season and just like walking around all willy-nilly, bumping all the deer off the property, putting all this pressure on, and then the fact that we're not doing anything to make the land better. And this mindset, this phrase that I would hear all the time from these guys, and you hear it all the time. It's just too bad that's the way it is. Like, oh, that used to be a really good spot, but it's went downhill, and that's just too bad. Or, that used to be a really good property next door, and then so and so bought it and developed it. It's just too bad that that's what happened. My mindset always goes back to, yeah, it is too bad, but also, what can we do about it, right? So, like in our area, our farm is almost 100% surrounded by Amish and within it. Like it's not a giant block. It's, it's kind of broken up based on topography and it's mostly Amish. So that was one of the mindsets. Like, man, the Amish, they, if it's brown, it's down. They kill everything. That's just too bad. It'd be great if we could grow bigger deer, but it's just too bad that the Amish, they'll kill anything. Yeah, that is bad. Okay, well, let's have a conversation with them. So I start talking to the Amish neighbors. And it actually turns out that most of them want to kill big deer. They just don't have trail cameras and they don't understand deer management. So I started doing community cooperative meetings and getting the Amish. I mean, last year I did one in October and we had 30 neighboring landowners show up and 60% of them were Amish. And I don't sit here and say, don't shoot this deer, shoot that deer. I just say, if you want to kill deer like this is how we manage it going forward. We need to kill a lot of does and let some of these younger bucks walk. And also we need to look at the habitat because they don't have any concept of habitat management. Their land is naked because they think it should all be a pasture, right? So that's just one case in point or an example, but getting ahead of those things, And again, not falling into this mindset of like it's just too bad. Let's let things fall apart because it's just too bad. Instead, take some level of control. So you've got
No,
something to say.
no, no.
Oh, I was gonna
I'm
say.
listening to you. Go finish
So
your thought. Yeah.
one of the things with our hunting party, they want to have fun, and I totally respect that. And the problem, actually, at its core, the problem is that they built this hunting cabin in the middle of the best deer hunting valley on the farm, the best valley of habitat, period. And they want to show up. And again, a lot of these guys live in a suburb or in a city somewhere, and so they show up and they want to have fun on the farm. They want to recreate, and I don't want to take that away from them. But I also put in a lot of time and energy to provide things for the deer so we have high quality deer hunting. And then it all goes out the window when they show up with 8 ATVs and bomb around the whole property, or they're sighting in their rifles, or this guy got a new AR-15 and they want to shoot it in this valley the day before season. Like that's great, but we can't keep doing that. So what I've done is I've shifted this a little bit. It's not 100% there, but it's getting there to where when they show up to hunt, they take it a little bit more serious. We still play cards and drink beer in the cabin, but they're not hooting and hollering and doing all the crazy stuff. And instead, what we've created is an annual habitat camp. So now instead of going crazy in November, or for a while they wanted to do it like mid-October, and that was even worse for me because I want the bow hunting, right? Now, and these guys love it now. Like we're on year 3 of it, and that's all they talk about at deer camp. It's like, oh, are we still doing that the last weekend in February? Where they show up, and the kids love it because there's usually some snow on the ground. So the kids are sledding, they're getting pulled around on ATVs, and then I get 6 or 8 guys with chainsaws and just say, hey, feather this whole edge. Or I'll drop the trees, you guys come behind me and chunk them up, and then we get a guy in a skid steer. We can get a lot done in a short period of time.
Mm,
And these guys have fun, but more importantly to me, they see the work that's going into it. And then
yeah.
3, 4 years later, they're like, man, that spot that we cut all those trees out of, that looks really good in there. Man, I kicked up all these deer, or all those
Yeah.
turkeys were, whatever it might be. They finally get that connection to it. And that starts to snowball a little bit more and a little bit more. But it still keeps that level of camaraderie in there, right? So now,
Mhm.
like, we can still hunt at a serious level, and it's the younger generation. So like my cousins are the ones that are really getting involved. The uncles, yes, as bad as it is to say, there's a few of them I'm just kind of waiting for them to expire, like
Oh
kind of
my
fade
God.
out because we just butt heads. I mean, it's just that mentality. It's like I've got one uncle that he hunts like 3 days a year on our farm and not serious at all. Like, gets to the tree stand an hour after daylight. An hour later, he's cold or bored and he's out driving around. But he'll show up and he'll hang a tree stand. And actually, like, the situation with him goes back many years where he hung this stand in this spot and he cut down like a dozen 8-inch diameter white oaks to create a shooting lane, and then he never even hunted. And I was like, what are you doing? Things like that. Or we plant a whole bunch of trees in the spring, and then in the fall they show up with their ATVs and they're running things over because they're just having fun, right?
Yeah.
So there's issues with that. But to me, it all stems back to the connection with the land. And as you guys know, it's like if you give a kid a bike, do they appreciate it as much as if they work for it and they save their money and then they buy the bike, then they really have pride in that and they take care of it. So
Yeah.
the more I get these guys to invest time, and not even so much money, I just ask them for their time. Like, give me a weekend, maybe 2 if we can work out 2, but one
Mhm.
weekend for sure. And then they put more time in, and they also understand things better. And the last couple of years for me on the hunting side has really changed that dynamic because when I first approached them, and I'm not going to admit to be or claim to be super tactful with how I approach personal relationships. I'm pretty straightforward most of the time. My wife will tell you that straight up. But it's kind of one of those things where you can be subtle, and then eventually you get backed into the corner, and that's what happened to me. I got backed into the corner. I was like, hey, this is how it is, like plain and simple. And for a while, I was looked at as like the Grinch that stole deer camp because for like 3 or 4 years, like the tempo was way down. I didn't go to deer camp for a couple of years because I just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that came back around. But in the last few years, what I've got them to understand is one, I don't like my success isn't based on luck, it's based on time investment. And two, I'm strategic with how I hunt, and there's a reason why I do things, right? And it got bad enough a few years ago that these guys, my family, they were like kind of, I guess I don't know if it was like kind of they're trying to play a joke on me or if they were legitimately trying to sabotage what I was doing. But I would avoid them as much as possible. And typically I'm hunting in the fall, I'm hunting the best days. I get the wind that I want, the weather patterns that I want, and my schedule is flexible and I just fill in the time with all the other things I have going on. But a lot of times that would mean like I would hunt, they'd come and hunt like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I would hunt Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we wouldn't really see each other. And it got to the point where like they're putting grocery bags over my trail cameras and messing with my setups and stuff like that. So finally I was just like, hey, like, can we be adults here? Let's have a conversation about this. And I started explaining things to them at a deeper level. And I also had to get them to meet me in the middle because, again, I was like the young kid, one of the youngest in the group. So I'm sure they look at me as like still the kid that followed them around in the woods with a stick and pretended it was a gun when they were walking around with high-powered rifles, right? But a couple years ago, it was actually this deer here, this 8-pointer. I I made a point to explain to my cousins that were down bow hunting every decision I made essentially. So I would try to overlap days with them hunting, or we'd have a group text, and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm going after that deer in this area on Friday because of these conditions," and then I'd have an encounter with them, and I'd videotape it, and then I'd show it to them, and it just kept on like kind of piling up, and then ultimately with this deer in particular, it got down to like the weekend before gun season, and my cousin and I were kind of talking back and forth, and I was like, I've got a theory that that buck is bedded in this spot, and the reason why he's not daylighting in these other areas is the pressure on the farm. So what I'm going to do tomorrow, it's supposed to be super windy. I'm going to still hunt my way into this spot and see if I can pick up some sign. Maybe I find the deer, but ultimately I want to scout this and put together a game plan to make one last push before the rifle season hits, and then everything's chaos, right? But I told my cousin, I was like, you hunt that stand at the bottom of the valley, which is his favorite spot. Because if I bump this buck, if he is in this bedding area, he's going to run right into the wind, right towards you, and it should be perfect. Long story short, I found the deer in his bed. 4.5 hours, I stalked in, I shot him in his bed. And that wasn't even the highlight of it. The highlight of it was, okay, like my theory came true and I was successful. But the highlight of the season wasn't that. The highlight of the season was I had put some box blinds out in some other spots for myself and my kids to hunt, and then my older uncles. And one of my uncles that actually is probably one of the main reasons I'm as passionate about hunting as I am, he always deer hunted, but he was a fanatic turkey hunter. And like the kind of guy that when you start talking turkey hunting, you just see his eyes light up and he's super excited. And he was really the one that like, he didn't really teach me anything, but showed me the passion. Because I'll never forget as a 12-year-old kid, him giving me like a rusty 20 gauge shotgun and a beat up box call and parking me in the woods, and like, the woods comes alive when the sun comes up, right? But he's the one that really promoted that passion for me, and he's reaching a point now, he's got Parkinson's or dementia, and he's got all sorts of health problems. And one of these box blinds I put out was not far from our cabin, a nice food plot, nice transition area, gorgeous habitat. It's like a picture perfect scene, right? I was like, you need to just go sit in that blind. He had never hunted out of a blind before in his life, and everyone came back to deer camp that opening weekend of gun season. No one killed anything. Everyone saw stuff, but he was the one telling the story over and over and over. And his story was, you're never going to believe it, I had 6 deer within 40 yards of me for like 2.5 hours. And it was like, it was crazy. He's like, and none of them were bucks or anything, but he's just like so excited. And he ended up killing a nubbin buck like the next day. And we were all jacked for him. I was like, I don't care what you kill. I don't care. Like, and the same with my sons. Like, it's so fun when everything is a target now instead of like focusing on one deer. But that kind of proved to them, okay, one, I'm not hunting based on luck, and two, all these things I'm doing are for all of us, not just for me. Not just for me, right? And now, like the last couple of years, it's really started to snowball where they're like starting to understand. And I'll be like, hey, yeah, you should hunt there, or we should do this thing. And then they see the results of that and they start to understand it. So we've gotten the camaraderie back, and the group is slowly coming back together, and we're still going to butt heads. I mean, working with family is very challenging, right?
Yeah.
But it's all coming back around, and the message for everyone is you can definitely be successful and kill high caliber deer and still have a lot of fun and still get the youth engaged and not take it so serious all the time. And habitat is the core of that. It
Yeah.
really is. You know, it's like we make all these excuses, but at the end of the day, habitat is what creates the opportunity, and we have to capitalize on that.
Yeah, it's yeah, there's so much to unpack there. It's I want to kind of go back to the camaraderie of it and hunting aspect of it, because it's like it made that way you grew up, the fortunate way of you growing up, the farm life and what have you. And then the way I grew up, I grew up working on farms. We had a hobby farm, but wildlife, like you said, born in a barn, raised in the woods, But like for Cody, it's funny. I was going to say, not speaking for Cody, let's pretend Cody's not here for a second and actually got up and left for a second, is that like it made him, that way of growing up made him who he is. Like Cody is a very philosophical fellow because of that. And he's one of the greatest conservationists I know. And I've been doing this a very long time because of that camp mentality and those guys making journals and writing stuff down. It made Cody who he is. And it's so unfortunate because you have, I preach a lot about generations when it comes to logging and forest health and hunting. So you kind of have to do your homework. That way you can have a good educated conversation about it. And you have Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which is below them, they're starving for information. They're not the millennial generation. They're different. They might be quiet, but they stand back and they are soaking this stuff in. Mm-hmm. And Cody has a nephew who fits that Gen Alpha. And it's like, just because he doesn't see or say anything doesn't mean that he's not noticing. And it's so unfortunate that, like, again, not speaking for Cody, and I want him to talk about this. Cody, we're talking about your camp and how.
All I heard was that I was the greatest conservationist. I was still plugged in. I heard it all.
Okay. So, well, good. Well, I said that just because, whatever. I don't mean it. It doesn't mean
I don't mean it.
Butter me up.
Yeah. It's so funny. But no, it's so unfortunate because I think, that does not exist because his nephew is at that prime age. He might not say anything. He might not acknowledge that this is going on, but he's in the same bloodline as Cody. And I'd be damned if he's not going to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like that generation is prime picking for great conservation work. But the millennial, my Gen X, baby boomer, we're not there anymore because of confrontations and putting plastic bags over cameras and families not getting along because it's all about inches and status and stuff. We're missing that opportunity because I think that generations, they're prime. I honestly feel, and this is really, and it's not even a conversation to have, but I think that's the generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're the ones that's going to save us. But we got to set them up for success to do that when it comes to conservation and stuff. But we're not there. We're not taking them squirrel hunting and doing that stuff because that's going to mess up deer. Yeah. But you having that habitat day, you said, you're taking kids on the 4-wheeler rides in the, in the snow, you're pulling a sled. We did that. That was awesome. We had a Corvette hood. My dad pulled with a tractor, man. Yeah. Dude, it was smear. You can't say that anymore, but smear. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
We would beat the hell out of one another as kids. The neighborhood, like to be the last one on the Corvette hood. And but they say you guys cutting trees and edge feathering. Just because they're out playing doesn't mean they're not connecting.
Yeah.
All that stuff is fun. And one of them is going to pick up the torch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
And that's what's frustrating with all this. Like, man, we're not there because we went down. I loved your the way you say the was an industrial complex of hunting. It's just funny. I'm listening to you, not to get sidetracked, and it's like I'm listening from the beginning of this podcast. I was quiet because I was listening to you, and I'm like, you are me, or I am you, like 20 something years ago. I was, my professional career started in 97. I started my business in 2001. I was on top of a mountain waving a flag in the mid 20s. Like I was it.
Yeah.
Got awards behind me hanging on my wall for my accolades, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm just, who's the old grumpy guy in the corner, you know, but
Well,
but it's funny. I'm listening to you, you're saying food to cover. And that's like, Cody, that's food equals cover. Your camera work. I did a big camera survey. I think you're actually stalking me is what I think what's going on here.
well, maybe.
Yeah,
It's
no,
it's
but
funny.
it's so exciting the whole time. I'm like, dude, I am you. And I like, it's funny. Jason Snavely is a one of the greats consultants, and we had a conversation this while back. He said, the problem, Eric, nickname Stretch. He goes, hey, Stretch, what the problem is we peaked too early. We didn't have social media and all this stuff and the knowledge. We were teaching old field environments and stuff, and people. It was fun because people actually gravitated toward it because it was all new. There was no ceiling with them yet, so that aspect of it was so much fun, and I couldn't get off on it enough. To do it today, everybody knows more than you when you show up.
Yeah, yeah.
It's frustrating, but I just had to get that off my chest.
No,
for
and,
some
and you're
reason.
spot on. I mean, yeah, we obviously live in this YouTube education system, right? Which presents its own challenges, but also
Yeah.
brings the awareness. And it's funny. I was on a new client property a couple months ago. Uh, Another great family. It's like two brothers and their son that own this property together. And I got there, the son was like, it's a pride thing, it's an ego thing, but he's like, I think I'm really good. I've got a pretty good handle on designing or setting up a property, but we just wanted to get your perspective on the habitat side of things. And then as we work through the day, and I got the same thing from another client that's got three huge properties. Him and his brother full-time manage these properties. He built a business, sold the business, and that's all they do. Three properties over 1,000 acres in three different states. And this is kind of the same conversation. He's like, I hired you for this, but holy cow, like I never even realized all these other things. Like, we just wanted your perspective on the timber stand management side of things, but I had no idea that, prairies this or native forbs that, or we could food plot in this more efficient way or whatever it might be. And again, this goes all the way back to like we all have a bias at some level. And if we shift our bias to the resource and efficiency with it versus like, just because I have money, I can throw money at it, right? Because that doesn't always solve our problems. If we shift that bias, then you get more people thinking about the management side of things and the long-term effects of it. And ultimately, a lot of this stuff just stems from this DIY world, which I'm not opposed to in any way, shape, or form because I'm very much that kind of guy, right? It's like I want to try and learn things as much as possible. And what I tell my clients all the time with like YouTube is most of the videos that people put out on YouTube are pretty good content and there's things to be learned. But what you don't know or understand is if it's even applicable to your situation, right? Or, this guy talking about, oh, even like, okay, so if I watch a video that Cody posts about what he's doing where, in Virginia, West Virginia, like there's things I can take away from that for sure, but I'm also dealing with completely different species, right? So like it's not apples to apples, and the average person is going to be like, oh, like planting things, especially like, oh, I should plant this species here because Cody said it's great for deer and grouse. Well, that doesn't even grow here, right? So if you can get it to grow there, or you're like it's out of context, so you're either forcing that to grow or you're introducing a species that wouldn't normally grow there. So it might not be the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, it's not really part of that native system, so it doesn't bring the same benefits and whatnot. But that's just an example. The YouTube world, the YouTube education, it can be great to a certain extent, but there is no better classroom than actually getting out there and doing it. And that's again why I think you have to do the work to be a good consultant at some level. You might reach like your status, Eric, where like you've done it for so long that I'm sure you're still doing some level of work, whether it's your own property or just a select few clients, but you have to understand like there's certain problems and new problems coming up. And if you're not boots on the ground and addressing these things, then it's hard to put together a good plan. And even like the
Yeah.
economy and like, like these products are hard to get, or the process of rehabilitating certain areas, like, using these brands or these products works better than these other products just because this company, maybe it's more affordable. Maybe they're more in line with what we're trying to accomplish and not just try to push the product sales and stuff like that. So there's a lot of layers and levels to it, but
Yeah.
we all
Well,
need to learn all the time. And, the
yeah.
education never really stops.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing when it comes to habitat and like consultants is that it's always just I think the majority of the information is just the top of the surface, if you will, the tip of the iceberg. But it's like pollinators, for example. You have like, a client that's, he's a conspiracy theory guy, big government. He's got locked and loaded downstairs. He's wanting the apocalypse come, but he wants pollinators, and that's like talking to somebody, like you said in the beginning, what's your goals, either a phone conversation before you show up or at the client. But when you have somebody with that mentality, I'm not going to be pushing pollinators to someone like that because we are one thing away from the monarch getting listed. And you don't know what the guidelines are for people that are enrolled in CRP, equip, and yada, yada, yada. And if you're in CRP or whatever, and like I said, it's all speculation, but when they do, because it's coming, and they list the monarch, there's going to be guidelines that you can do on your property. It's either you get out of that program or you follow that. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to encourage that to somebody, but knowing information like that, and knowing the habitat and stuff. And I had that I knew it was kind of like I'm really going to be, slowly retiring from this. Is the last consult I did, or one of the last consults I did. I remember it was like yesterday. All I did was argue with the guy, and all the years that I've never argued at all. And it was like, well, this guy I watch on YouTube, he's telling me this, and you're telling me that. I don't know who to believe. And I told him eventually, like, dude, you paid me. How about we listen to me today? Tomorrow, when I leave down the road, man, I don't give a shit what you think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you paid me. And he kept on bringing up and I knew who he was talking about, but it was, well, I just can't buy into this because I see on YouTube all this stuff. And it's like, man, they're using an umbrella. Like, you're just wanting the quick fix, and that doesn't exist. We've had this discussion before I showed up. And I remember driving home. I remember calling my wife, and I'm like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm going to be slowly semi-retiring from this because I can't do that. It's like, I see this stuff, and it's refreshing to hear what you were talking about, because it's like looking in the mirror, but I'm better looking, of course. But it's just, yeah, but it's refreshing to hear, the whole time listening to you, because it's like, listen, I mean, you're preaching what needs to be said, and it's very refreshing to hear.
Well, and in my, again, my perspective, I think perspective is everything, right? And you see the world from different angles. And, the analogy I use on that with clients is like, okay, so bring it back to the deer hunting side of things. It's like, if you only have one perspective on judging a deer, maybe it's just a trail camera photo of a certain angle, and you're looking at the rack and you're trying to quantify inches, right? You only have that one angle. But if I can get that deer's antlers in my hands and turn them side to side and, quantify it with a tape measure, like, you understand the situation so much more. So that's why the more perspective you have in any situation, I think, is better. Not just personal perspective, but like, one of the things I don't really like about the consulting industry as a whole, and it's not really the consulting industry, it's more, again, the whitetail consulting side of things, where, like, probably what you were dealing with, like, they buy into this cult mentality or this following of one person, and they believe everything that they say, and that person walks their property and everything that they say is gospel, and that's the way it is. I'll walk properties with guys and I'll give them my perspective and layout, and then I'll say, your property is 90% timber. We should really bring in a state forester and just see what he has to say about this plan before we go crazy with it. And a lot of times we don't learn anything new. Sometimes we do. And to me, it's like, it's a free resource first and foremost. It's like, what are
Right.
you out besides
Mm.
2 weeks of waiting for him to show up? Or maybe he comes in, he walks it, and he puts together a plan that's accepted by the state. Now you have a tax benefit there, right? So there's all those things in there. But ultimately, the more perspective you gain, the more you can understand a situation. And when you explain that to clients, or how I explain it to the clients, it seems to help. But I also kind of have this mentality, and it's probably getting more to that as time goes on. A friend of mine, he's a pastured pork farmer in Iowa, retired, or I guess they don't technically say retired, but he's a former Marine, right? Uh, but he said it to me one day. He's like, I'm just waiting until I get old enough to say exactly what I want to say and not care what other people think. Because he deals with the factory pork industry, right? Everyone telling him that you can't raise pigs outside. He deals with that all the time, and he's trying to be ecologically conscious with his operation. But I'm kind of in the same boat, and it's not so much like I definitely don't say what I want to say all the time, but I'm also not like tailoring my message so much to where I'm like trying to appease these other people. At this point, again, I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough to be busy enough where I don't actually care if I bring in a ton more clients. I need to care at some level, right? I need clients, I need work, right? But I'm not like out like, trying to bend or trying to make stupid content just so I get more views so I can get these guys in, because those are the guys. And I've learned that too. Is like the guys that reach out to me and they argue my pricing or my process, and then I bend for them because I'm trying to pick up more business. They're the worst clients every time. They're always the worst clients. And those are the guys that you walk the property and it is one in one ear out the other, because they have this bias in their mind where they're just waiting for me to tell them the things that they agree with, and everything else that I tell them they're just ignoring, right? And I know you've dealt with that before because you always deal with it. And I deal with that with every client at some level. It's like a
Mhm.
little thing here, a little thing there. But then as the day goes on and repetition, like, native plants, native diversity, food and cover, food and cover, food and cover. And then, oh yeah, we'll also talk about food plots, but that's like a really small portion of what we're doing here. But we need to talk about these other things. Then eventually they're like, okay, I get it. I get it, right? But
Mhm.
I've also learned that if I don't stay engaged with them, then that all falls apart when they talk to the next guy. So that's like a whole nother thing I've been working on. And I've got this whole system that I'm building, which I'd love to have a conversation with you guys outside of the podcast. And we'll talk about this in more detail. And eventually maybe we'll have a podcast about it, right? But that is part of the problem too, is like I, for example, last week I was up in the infamous Door County of Wisconsin. Have you guys heard of Door County, Wisconsin? It's like
Mm-mm. Mm.
coastal, very temperate climate. It's the peninsula of if this is Wisconsin, it's the thumb,
Mm.
Yeah.
like
Okay.
up here in the middle of Lake Michigan. Beautiful area. I've never consulted up there. I've actually never even been there before, uh, which is sad to say because I mean, it's 4.5 hours from me, but it's a beautiful area. When I went there, I was expecting like a little bit more pristine landscape, but it's the same problems we deal with everywhere. I mean, tons of invasives and habitat loss and all the things. But ultimately, I forget where I was going with this now. Man, I lost my train of thought.
Well, welcome to age. It's great. Hey, you know what? It only gets better. I usually do this once per podcast, and so far I haven't. Yeah,
It-
it's
what,
frustrating.
what were we just talking about?
You're
The
talking about building a system.
the building the system. Man, what was? Oh, yeah. So ultimately, I go consult on this, and I've got some connections with some local land managers in the area. Right, I don't know them well. I know them well enough. They're good
Yeah.
people. I respect them, and we can communicate well. And that's kind of really my minimum entry when I work with people. Is like, we can communicate, and also you're willing to like try new things, then we can work together. So I go to this property and I'd already talked to this land manager and basically said, I've got this guy here. He's going to need some work done. Do you know a local logger? We'd like to get a perspective from a logger. He wants to plant some trees. Like, is that something you'd like to take on? All these things. And then when I got off the property, I reached back out to the guy. He got back to me. He's like, yeah. He's like, are you running point on this, or am I going to be taking over with working with the client? What I would love to do, because I don't like to get involved as much as possible. I don't like to get involved like in the flow of money. Like I'd rather like you pay me for what I do, and then you pay him and you guys work that out. I'm not motivated by money, and that's like one of my flaws with owning a business is like even just like sending invoices. I'm like, I just don't like doing it. It feels
Right.
dirty. I'd rather like
Yeah.
just, volunteer all my time, but that's not sustainable either. But anyways, I've learned that if I just like pass them on to these guys and walk away, then I come back in 5 years and they haven't implemented any of the plan. They might have some of the design, but then this other guy, I'm not speaking directly about this individual, but in the past, like these other guys come in and they still bring in that old school or more conventional mentality, and nothing actually happens with the plan, or it goes off rails. Like, we want better cover over here, so we should plant this to like diverse habitat and maybe some tree plantings. I come back and it's just pure switchgrass. We said you want cover there, and it was just, I explained to him that's a lot easier to just plant switchgrass. I'm like, yes, I get that, but that's not what we're trying to accomplish, and you just degraded this property more than you improved it, right? So I'm trying more and more. It's very challenging because like right now I'm essentially like the project manager across like 50 properties. So trying to farm with all the variables that are involved with habitat management and trying to work with all these like third party entities along the way, like trying to do that. My furthest northern client's up in Duluth, Minnesota, which is like 4 hours straight north of me. My furthest southern client is like 4.5 hours straight south of me down in Missouri. But it's mostly in this, I try to stick mostly to this Mississippi corridor. And I've got clients kind of spread out, but most of them are here. It's just really challenging at the end of the day. But it's one of those things where I'm just not willing to take the easy path and ultimately the more lucrative path. Like, yeah, if I go this way and just like hand you a plan, walk away, it's fine. But there's like this hook that's in me all the time where I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. And if I don't feel like that person understands it thoroughly, then it falls apart. And the same with like how I hand my information over to people, that's always evolving. And that's ultimately this new system that we're working on. And it's keeping them engaged, but keeping them interested and continuing the education. Like I was saying, like we always need to keep learning because every situation is different. And someone that, they get 1 day of education from a consultation and a packet of information, like, again, it's a flip of a coin. Do they stick with it or do they veer off on that easy path? Because the guys that are talking in their ear now are the guys that are trying to make the money off of that plan, and they're trying to push them down the easy path too. So it's this snowballing effect.
Mhm.
And if I had it my way, I, I almost said I'd put in a monopoly on the industry, which I don't want to do. But ultimately, I'd like to have
He's
enough.
a fascist as well.
I'd like to have enough influence on the industry where when people look at it, they go, "That approach is a better approach than this approach." But there's hurdles, right? That's a long way of saying you might have peaked before your time, Eric. But you also are a pioneer, right? And
Yeah.
without guys like you showing guys like Cody and myself that like this is a possibility of a career path, and also like these are the ways that we should be doing things, right? Like it's not like I woke up one day like Aldo Leopold and just started journaling from a cabin and taking notes of everything. Yeah,
Right.
I journal and I observe, and observation is the biggest part of what I do. But at the same time, there's a lot of other people out there that came ahead of me and are solving problems and dealing with clients and stuff like that. And there's a lot to learn from those situations. But things are changing all the time. These battles that we fight, like right now, it's like, what's going to happen if these data centers go in all over the place? Like that's a massive step backwards for conservation. And again, it's like you got 50% of society that's understands that they're a potential problem, and the other 50% is the lazy percentage of people that they're like, oh, we need AI. Whatever I can do to not leave my sofa and get my Doritos delivered to me, I'm here for that party, right? But
Right.
again, those people are disconnected from the land, and it's just one of those battles. I mean, the last few months have been, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way. It's like you really have to take a step back from social media and the news, because all it is negative stuff on the environmental side, and getting people
Oh
to
yeah.
understand that. And it's
Yeah.
it's made it even worse. I've argued this before too, that whether it's like the globalist movement or whatever it is that is pushing the green energy stuff, they've created that tribalism to a point that they've divided us all so much where if you are pro green energy or pro fossil fuel, it doesn't matter, right? Like somewhere in there, one side or the other is the devil. And climate change is all a hoax and it's all made up and the carbon crisis is all a hoax and it's all made up. And it's like, well, really, if you look around, we do have some serious problems and we have to address them. And there's no point in arguing, but we have to look at things objectively. Like windmills are a good example. Are windmills the solution? Are solar farms the solution? Maybe somewhere in there they are, but does taking over hundreds of thousands of acres of prime farmland or prime habitat to put in machines that generate energy, like is that the solution?
Well,
Right?
yeah,
My
I
solution
think
for the
that,
data centers, because everything's cyclical,
Yeah.
yeah,
and I hope I'm right about this, is when we are in no longer need of data centers, we'll just turn them into chipping mills.
Yeah.
And then we got
there you
somewhere
see,
to take
there you
our
go.
wood.
There's your,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Well, it's the thing about it is, and I got to wrap up, unfortunately, here pretty soon, but what we're dealing with, you said something that sparked this thought is like my son, he's 20, he'll be 24. He's a fireman, EMT, he's really successful at his early age, and he's he hunts. He's not a hunter, but he hunts. He had me for a dad. Of course, he's always exposed to it.
For better or worse.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even go down that road, Altizer. Yeah, it was just, here's how do we move the needle when he's door dashing Taco Bell, that instead of getting in his car, driving to Taco Bell and paying $8, he paid $30 now. That is what we're doing. That's what conservation groups are missing out on. How do you talk to that person? Like, that's the mentality that none of us can understand. And to them, that's life. There was nothing wrong in his mind. And is there? I don't know. Being an old fogey, yeah. It's like, get your ass up and go to the thing. Burn fossil fuel, go to Taco Bell and buy some whatever that is and come back and excrete it out in the bathroom. Like, do it like a man.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's just, so it's just to them, that's what we're dealing with. Like, everything we talked about is great. I mean, we've had some really great conversation this whole time, but it's, again, we have to stop thinking of where we are mentally and how do we move a needle if we want this to continue. Because Cody and I did a video back in the day called Kids These Days. And I encourage you to watch it. I think you would enjoy it, especially with your children. But we have a line in there, and Cody's, correct me, I'm going to probably butcher this. We are expecting them to come to us and us come to them.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole concept of the whole video, the short film, is like we want them to come to us and not us come to them, and they can't come to us because we're not there. There's that DoorDash example away of trying, like, how do we get to them to where they see a log truck and they don't see the Lorax, they see a grouse flourishing, healthy for that's your homework, Thomas. You get that figured out and we'll circle back.
I'm working on it. I am. And again, this, like, we could go down a whole nother conversation and I think we should obviously have more conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I've really enjoyed this. I mean, even though it's started for me at 5 a.m., but
yeah,
I'm usually up at 4. So it was,
there you go.
it was something
to
look forward to instead of just like grinding away or jumping on my computer to do bookwork stuff.
Yeah.
But no, you're spot on. It is, how do we connect with more people? And also, how do we connect like-minded people together without solely being influenced by product sales and the industry itself? But how do we connect people through conservation? And there's a lot of, there's so many layers to it.
Oh yeah.
And it's got to happen, right? It's not an easy task. My gray hairs, you're just growing, multiplying all the time. It's the stress levels, but it's the burden that we take on. It's the choice that we take on, the sacrifice essentially that we make, and I'm not trying to say this for like, we're not like, I mean, we are, but we're not like oppressed entirely. We
Hmm.
live in a country where we are blessed to be able to make these decisions, right? We bring on these
Yeah.
battles ourselves, but
Hmm.
ultimately, it's kind of the same thing. It's like if we all just turn away from confrontation, if we all just turn and take the easy path of least resistance, the resource is what suffers more than anything.
Oh,
And
amen, man.
I
Yeah.
don't want to wake up tomorrow or 50 years from now, 40 years from now, and look out the window and see nothing but skyscrapers, concrete, smokestacks, data centers, and the biggest thing to me, honestly, again, back to, the brain shift of having kids is like, I don't think we should, I mean, if you want to live in a free country, which, again, another rabbit hole we could go down with how free we actually are with what we're paying for and what we're getting in return. But ultimately, if we want to live in a quote free country and the trajectory we're on, we're going to be paying for every drop of water that we consume that's potable, right? And we're pretty soon we're probably going to have to pay for breathable air, at some point in time if things go the way that the government and the tech companies want things to go, which is completely ignore the environmental side of things because they don't want to accept the environment for what it is, which is an essential system that provides services to us all, right?
Hmm.
And so again, you don't have to appreciate or be a hunter, but you should appreciate what hunters are trying to do or what conservationists are trying to do. And I say that loosely because a lot of hunters have lost sight of conservation and are just so solely focused on annual goals, annual success that they're not looking at the big picture anymore. And we
Yeah.
need to step back from that.
Yeah. Well, like again, I apologize, cutting it short, but I guess we have been talking for quite a while. At the beginning of the podcast, we're like, well, you're going to be talking 2.5, 3 hours. And we're like, we won't be. Yeah. It was, yeah. And this is just, and I could go for another hour. Um, Cody, we usually have a question that we usually ask everybody. I'll let Cody ask it because that's his shtick. So, um, Cody,
Yeah, we
want to
always
jump?
end the podcast because most of our podcasts are about grouse, which we've touched on grouse in this one.
Yeah, a
But
little bit. Yeah.
we always ask people, and to kind of end on a high note, what your most memorable and meaningful experience with a ruffed grouse is, if you got one. A hunt, a flush, hearing one drum, seeing a hen and some chicks. If there's one that jumps off
Yeah,
the
even
top of your
woodcock.
mind.
I can, I've never hunted grouse. Never, I've shot a couple while rabbit hunting and eaten them and they're delicious, but never like full on grouse hunted because we've never had giant populations.
Hmm.
It kind of ebbs and flows. But I can tell you, I remember it very vividly. Again, growing up in the woods and more often left to my own devices and exploring because busy family. There's always the things going on, and I'm like, oh, I have time to slip away. I don't know how old I was, probably around my son's age, like 8, 9, 10 years of age. But I remember vividly the first time I ever saw a ruffed grouse. And I was down in, ironically, the valley where that cabin is built now, and kind of playing around, and I kept on hearing this noise. And in my mind, I was like, man, what is that noise? Like in the distance? Like, is it an old tractor trying to start up? That whoop,
Mhm.
whoop, 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 whoop. And I just kept on following it and closer and closer and closer. And it's like it's probably why I'm as passionate about the outdoors as I am. Like those little moments that are burned in your brain. I remember it because it was relatively early in the morning, and I came up over this knoll, and I was kind of in this like stalking hunter mode, trying to figure out what's going on. And I came up over the top of this knoll right at the time that this grouse started to drum again, and it was like the sun was hitting this log just perfectly. It was
No.
like this little opening, and I watched this bird get up and drum, and then turn. I was like, what is that thing? Is it like a mini turkey? And I go back home
Yeah.
and I'm trying to explain it to everyone and everyone's busy and they don't care. And I think I actually had the conversation with my uncle and he was like, "Oh, that's a grouse. So where'd you see it?" And he was really excited about it. But that is my most fond memory of grouse. And then that stuck with me forever. And, we take family fishing trips up to Canada every once in a while. My family goes up there, like I said, family goes up there every single year, and I'd go once in a while. And now like bear hunting up there more and spending more time in the Northwoods and like hearing the grouse. And it kind of came around full circle and also made me think about, habitat. I took this year, I took my nephew my 17-year-old nephew up to Canada with us to bear hunt, and we take him out, put him in a stand, and the setup, the situation we have up there, we kind of take over this camp, and they run baits for us part of the year, but we go in, we hang our own stands, we do all of our own actual hunting. So we went out and did all that stuff, and then he hunted the first day, and we got back to camp, and he's like, man, I kept on hearing this noise. And I was like, well, describe it. And he's like, guys, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of like a thumping. And I was like, that's probably a grouse. And he's like, no, it couldn't have been a grouse. And I kind of explained it to him, but he had never heard it.
It was a tractor then. How about that?
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Eventually, I was like, does it sound like an old tractor starting up in the distance? He's like, yeah, it does. I'm like, that's a rough grouse, right? But you guys know it's deceiving, like where that noise comes from sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the hills and stuff. Yeah. But that reminded me of my encounter as a kid.
Yeah.
Because I had, and that's what excites me taking kids out now. It's like everything's new to them. Everything's new to them. And it kind of relights that flame in us where like you see the excitement in their eyes and you're excited to show them something new. And that's something you don't want to take away from them. But even as a 17-year-old kid who's experienced a lot of stuff, he had never heard a grouse and never seen a grouse. And I just think that's so cool. And again, it's kind of promoted me. Again, doesn't really change what I do with habitat because we're kind of geared towards that anyways, but it's just another advantage to it or another message, a pro in the list of all the benefits that we gain by managing habitat for diverse species and diversity in general. So that's my earliest memory. And like I said, it's with me. At some point, I really want to get up in the woods and hunt. To be honest with you, it's like, how do you even hunt grouse in this thick, nasty north woods? Like, you got to have a good dog and you got to have a good
I got
shot.
a dog and we'll travel, brother.
Yeah.
Don't threaten me with a good time. You shoot the wolves and I'll hunt the grouse, right?
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, appreciate you taking the time. Like you mentioned, this has been an early podcast. We had to get up extra early and you even had to get up earlier. And appreciate you, doing that for Cody and I and stuff. And it's been a really great dialogue. Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about, the forest and grouse and the stuff that we normally talk about, but I think it's a great dialogue that people will definitely enjoy. That's for sure. So no, again, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Thomas. Before we let you go, let everybody know who's listening, where they can find you, how they can support you, why they should hire you.
Again, I appreciate you guys having me on and enjoy the conversation, early in the morning, but kind of feels like, that coffee conversation at deer camp where we're just kind of sitting around talking about not just the good old days, but also, again, like instead of the it's too bad mentality, more of like, we are in this and we are making things better. It's small, but the way I explain it to clients is the rippling effect, right? Like you have, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face, that land owning hunters that are conservation minded have the ability to make a positive impact, a massive positive impact. And when that stone hits the water and that ripple goes out, that's them. Like they can be that point of impact. And we see it, we improve a property. There's loggers coming and going. There's equipment coming and going. And pretty soon the neighbor calls me. Hey, what do you got going on there? And you explain it. Or they call the landowner. Hey, what do you got going on there? It's like that rippling effect. But I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do. Great conversation. Look forward to another one, whether it's podcast or just sitting down and talking, right? But for anyone that wants to reach out to me or wants to follow what I'm doing, The Untamed Ambition on social media. I'm not super, super active, but that's where you can find me. Otherwise, my website, theuntamedambition.com, you can reach out if you have specific questions, shoot me an email.
Get after
Right
it.
on.
Yeah.
Well, sounds good, man. We appreciate it. Again, as you said, hopefully, well, not even hopefully, I imagine the first of many. So looking forward to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Right on,
have a good day.
Yep, take care.
Drum roll for the aforementioned at the beginning of the episode, Strike Against Eric Long. We were filming a video a few weeks back. I'm editing it now.
Oh.
About brooding habitat. And in that brooding habitat, I made what I was proud of. Pretty cool analogy. It's spring and it's summer, American pastime. Chicks dig the long ball. Who digs brooding habitat? Chicks dig brooding habitat. All that to say, you referred to your favorite team as the Cleveland Guardians. Have it on film. Cleveland Guardians. Ladies and gentlemen, he's been
I am
coronated.
so sorry for the die-hard Wahoo fans.
You're even wearing
as
his
you can
hat
tell.
today.
Huh?
You're even
I
shaming
know.
him by wearing his hat.
I know,
For wearing
man.
his-
I tell you
his logo.
what, that's bad. See, I say things, and sometimes I don't mean them. You just have to figure out when I mean it, when I don't mean it. That's your
I was
job.
surprised it slipped past me when we were doing it, but I
Oh
caught
my
it today
God.
when I was
That's
going through the
blasphemy.
footage.
That's blasphemy. Yeah, I get. There is at times like, you know what? How do you let that go? But there's times where it's like you have to. It's not changing back, right? And don't be that guy. You know,
I don't
like you
got a
go to
dog
the
in the fight.
stadium and, huh?
I don't got a dog in the fight. It's a
Yeah.
stupid name. Objectively, Guardians is a lame name. It's a sweet logo. I think the baseball with the G.
You
and
like
the wings,
that?
I think
That
it's
is,
a cool
to me,
logo.
so childish. It's little league. I don't
I
like.
think it's a cool
I do
logo.
dig to see their uniforms are killer, man. They got the gray pants, dark blue with a big C, and the C's like kind of gothic, if you will, and it's pretty cool. It's just missing this little red Indian on it.
Yeah.
It's just bottom line. It's like it was funny. It's like today, look, I not today, but the other day, I was wearing a hat, and some guy he kind of looked over at me.
Florida,
You
again,
got
Florida's coach, University of Florida, our new football coach. I sent you the clip. Some random interview. He was like Cleveland Guardians. I forget what he says. Like that doesn't. I'm not comfortable saying that or something.
I know, but no, I missed that, but no,
I'll send it to you.
yeah,
Thomas Mlsna. Stamp of approval. Yay or
stamp
nay?
of approval. I tell you what, I think it was terrible. He needs a lot of learning. His vocabulary is um, yeah, just another consultant. No, how do you say this? And I don't want it to come off as jealousy or arrogance or narcissist, but right out of the get-go, like I'm listening to him, and again, I apologize. I don't want anybody thinking it's like, well, you think a little highly of yourself, but it was like listening to 20, 30-year-old, 40-year-old Eric. Like, man, yeah, right? Preach it, And then I got bitter. Like, son of a bitch. He stole my shtick. Yeah. No, he's everything that, you described him to me about, like his, it's so funny how you're like, you always bring up someone's vocabulary as, attractive to some, to you in the sense of, respecting somebody. And I started picking up on that too, hanging out with you, paying attention to how people talk and without saying the same thing, go circling back, say what you say, mean what you say. Right. And he definitely delivered that. And I really appreciated his willing to call out, and that's a strong word, but just like the hunting complex type thing. Like, we talked a lot about deer in this, obviously, but I think it might have been a very refreshing break for the people that just want to, I think it was a refreshing break for everybody to talk about something just a little bit different. But if you listen to what he said and then what we said, you can get something out of it when it referenced rough grouse for sure, right? So no, Thomas is again, man. I know I'll wrap this up here, but I can't say this enough. I know when we started this, and I sound like a broken record, but I was so worried. Like, man, I see these new up and comers, and they're just not impressive. But everybody we've had on, the younger, and I mean younger, 40 and under, man, the future's great. I mean, Thomas is a rock star, right? I mean, if he was in charge of something, you'd feel really good about what's going on.
Yeah.
He's going to do what's right, at least what in his eyes, and there's no other motivation behind it other than doing right for the resource. So there's your answer. How about that?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Right.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't really think of it at the time, but listening to you talk, I think he's a natural born leader. Is how I would
Mm-hmm.
best describe him. Among many
Yeah.
other things, with being a good teacher, communicator, educator, knows his stuff. I like you said, he said he kind of chimes in on Facebook stuff similar to how I do,
Yeah.
which again, you and I have talked about, and he feels similar. Like there's, it's easy to brush it off, but like for every 100 that's saying no, like you have a responsibility to be the one standing up saying what's right. I view that as accountability, or I view that as responsibility. And he and I share that. But what you were talking about, like calling out I forget what he called it, the whitetail industry
Industrial
complex.
Yeah.
Complex. That's accountability, which there needs to be more. I was thinking about that driving down the road today. There needs to be a lot more of that in our niche. All that to say, I mean, those are traits of a natural born leader. And like you said, you summed it up well. Like if he's in charge, if he walks into the room, you're listening to what he's saying and you're going to follow his lead.
One of the favorite lines that he said that had really nothing to do with anything. I mean, he had a lot of good things to say, obviously, but one of my favorite things that I think really sparked me, like, okay, you have me. You have me now, is when he said, I'm the kid in the back of the room that will raise his hand and question.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, damn right, man. Because I'm sitting right next to you, brother, going, this ain't right, or that makes sense, but you're going to have to, I'll do it, but you're going to have to explain to me why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it better be a good justification. I live that every day, every single day. It's like, that's what you got to do. And it doesn't, and screw anybody that thinks you're just a confrontational guy, or you're just doing it on purpose to disrupt. It's like, no, screw you, because you should be in the back of the room raising your hand, man.
Mm-hmm.
If you love this, instead of sitting on your thumb. So letting things happen the way they happen. So I didn't mean to get off rails there, but yeah,
No,
it's just,
I agree.
no, I appreciate, as soon as he said that, I'm like, all right, Thomas, your name, your last name's misspelled, but I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was impressed. Had been, with what little I knew about him prior to this conversation, but came away even more so. So
Yeah.
I'm sure
But
we'll have him back on or talk to him again, hopefully in a podcast, and hopefully not, honestly, so.
yeah, no, it's gonna be good. That was a good conversation. Yeah, hopefully that people that will listen will keep watching and listening all the way to the end. I mean, like we said, we talked about grouse a little bit in the timber and logging and stuff in his community, but there's a deep conversation. I hope everyone listened to. If you're listening to this part of it, you did.
It's true.
That's true. Yeah, right. So no, yeah, we're gonna hopefully be doing this for a long time. So we're gonna have guests on that. Not everything's about a bird, per se. So, but other than that,
That's all I got.
until next time, right?
Until next time.
Did you get the rain?
No, I thought I heard it. Thought I heard
You didn't
it
get
rumbling.
rain.
No.
It was right on your doorstep.
I mean, it got the ground wet, but it didn't amount to anything.
It dissipated because it was like it was going to rain at your place.
That's what it looked like.
Oh, you're really turn it the other. You had it good.
Well, it's right for me now. Must be wrong.
No,
for you.
you're up there, right there, right there.
But it's wrong for me. People don't know what we're talking about. My video screen messed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that's all I got.
That's all I got too. Well, wrap this up. Again, thanks for everybody for listening to the Give for Grouse podcast and always supporting the Give for Grouse initiative and everything that Cody and I do and believe in. It's really special that have people, some are friends and some are strangers, believing in this incredible mission of multiple things, trying to save a species and educate people on forest health and forest ecology. It's really cool. We should never take it for granted, Cody. Not that you do or I do. It's pretty interesting to have people just believe in you, and it's awesome, and let's make some noise. Let's kick some butt. And again, leave a review, get some stickers. We got merch. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Cody, appreciate you and everything you do for this thing. Never take you for granted. And as my grandpa always used to say, no hurry, no worry, keep moving.